6th, not 5th, 2021 Board of Directors meeting for MSAD 51. Thank you to everyone's flexibility in shifting this from last night to tonight. That was a little bit of a surprise, but thankfully we were able to reschedule with a quick turnaround. So to call to order, because we are remote, I do need to do a roll call. So please say your name when you, or please say present when you hear your name. Peter Bingham.
Present.
Kevin Desmond.
Here.
Present.
Ann Maximovich.
Present.
Tyler McGinley is present. Kate Perrin.
Here.
Mike Simmons.
Here.
Jennifer Stewart.
Here.
Michael Williams.
Here.
Elias Leggett-Barr. Okay, and Madison Dalton.
Here.
Awesome, thank you. So I just want to touch on a few things. Obviously, we are a remote meeting tonight. That change was made on Saturday after hearing quite a increased response to wanting to participate in this meeting. Although we do have a beautiful large art center, we would not have been able to hear from, I think at this point we have 65 people signed up for public comment. There's no possible way that we could have accommodated that number, even with the increased capacity that the governor has passed just this past month. We still would have to adhere to the 6-foot guidelines. So I just want people to understand that this shift was made to accommodate more participation, and by no means was made to silence anybody's voices. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that before we had made this switch, we had received a message from the town of Cumberland that they were planning to send 2 police officers to our in-person meeting. And the reason for that was they were concerned about behavior. And in addition to this, I've heard from many people that they do not feel comfortable attending our meetings in person and speaking. While the major choice of this was to create a place for people to feel safe and speak, I can't accept that this is our new normal for school board meetings. Having 2 police officers at our meetings just can't be normal. I've been on the board for 4 years, and until this past summer, it was the first time that I've ever seen police presence at our meetings. And so what I ask tonight is that we treat each other with respect, can do this in a civil and respectful way, because we're all talking to each other as neighbors right now. Names on here as I'm sitting at home. So please, let's take a deep breath and remember why we're here, and it is for our kids and our schools, and not to attack our neighbors. So please, let's keep that in mind as we continue through tonight. So as we move through the agenda, I see that we don't have anything listed for recognition. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes, no recognition tonight.
Okay, I'd like to kind of go off the agenda for a second and recognize you, Jeff, our superintendent. I think that there are times where you deserve to be recognized. And your personal life and the things that you do with your family is none of our business. And it does not have anything to do with your responsibility to run our district, to keep our students and staff safe. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you have done, regardless of what position you are on with this discussion. All of our administrators, including our superintendent, deserves respect. Thank you to Superintendent Porter.
Thank you, Tyler.
So we will move on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for the approval of the March 15th, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, and then we will go through roll call again. So Peter Bingham?
Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Ann Maximovich?
I abstain.
Thank you. Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin?
Yes.
Mike Simmons?
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
Elias Leggett-Barr, I don't know if you've joined us or not. Okay, and Madison Dalton.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and then the second set of minutes, so I have a motion for March 29th, 2021.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, roll call again. Peter Bingham,
Yes.
Kevin Desmond,
Yes.
Margot Harrington,
Yes.
Ann Maximovich,
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin,
Yes.
Mike Simmons,
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart,
Yes.
Michael Williams,
Yes.
and Madison Dalton.
Abstain.
Thank you. All right, so we have our first section of public comment is for anything that is not related to our getting to green conversation and presentation soon after this. Wondering if anyone has any non-related getting to green public comment.
We've had two so far. I'm not, oh yeah, there's, first up is Jen Tracy.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, it's 3 minutes for everyone. We have a lot of people to speak, so I'm going to awkwardly interrupt you when 3 minutes has come.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Tracy, and I'm a math teacher at the high school, but I'm here today as a parent to a 6th grader at Greeley Middle School. These are hard, scary, and sad times, and I want to acknowledge that. But I also know that my child sees how I'm reacting to these times. I feel the responsibility to change the narrative for my child, to change the narrative that she is behind. Behind in what? Our school is one of the top schools in the state. The learning process this year may look different, but is still a great education. She will grow up, go to college, get a job, and be a productive member of society. She will be fine, probably even thrive. The whole world is experiencing these educational struggles. She is not behind. To change the narrative that my daughter is missing out on the education she deserves. Instead, I reassure her of how strong she is and how many different skills she is learning during this time. The technology she has learned in the past year would have taken her years to be exposed to. She can email a teacher or a classmate if she has questions. She can use Google Meets and breakout rooms. She can make slideshows and use Jamboard and probably many other applications that I don't even get to see. She has learned to communicate in appropriate ways to her teachers. She can self-advocate for herself. She is learning to be self-motivated and to find answers to her questions when her teachers are not available. These are skills that are hard to teach in the normal classroom setting. She still gets to participate in band, math team, and many other extracurricular activities. Finally, to change the narrative that she's not getting a normal childhood, I argue the opposite. My daughter has had time to learn to sew and snowboard during the pandemic. She has had extra time with her grandparents who have luckily been able to watch her while I teach. This is valuable time that she will be able to cherish forever. She goes outside and plays with kids in the neighborhood. They ride bikes, play tag, and hide and seek. They use their imaginations to make up dances and games. This is the childhood we all dream of for our kids. I have to call her in. Granted, I call her on her cell phone when it gets dark out. This is a time in her life that she will never get back. She is getting the opportunity to be a kid. I encourage you all to look at the positive. Tell your children all that they are gaining through this time, that they will be fine, that they are thriving. They will be stronger for this. And I want to end by just thanking all of my daughter's teachers. I want to thank her Eagle team teachers, her Spanish teacher, her band teachers, her math team coach, her allied arts teachers this year. And I want to thank all the other GMS staff and administrators who have worked so hard for our children all year long. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Next is Sean McBrierty. Sean, you there? Sean, I see you unmuted, but I cannot hear you. You may need to troubleshoot that microphone a little bit. Before we move on, is there anybody else who had submitted a request to talk that that wanted to use this general session rather than the getting to green session? That didn't say that. Just speak up now.
Hey, Andy, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Priority, Cumberland. What you've seen from this administration, similar to the national political scene, is that they suffer from ideological subversion, not honored their oath of office. Here's a small list of things that bad decisions of the last 9 months. You hire a CCI, telling your kids to hate the color of their skin, theory indoctrination, BLM group on a transphobic, anti-racist. The creation of a woke cancel culture. Jeff Porter being reprimanded by the Maine Assistant Attorney General. Illegally withholding First Amendment rights, not following policies. 51 employees to use obscenities towards citizens. Slanderous comments. Not allowing you to watch your seniors' last fall sporting events. Equity meetings. School board members running private hate groups on Facebook. DC contact tracing. Not doing anything about reports of compromised security systems at Mabel I. Wilson. That had an option last year to take a 2.5% raise instead of 3%, so the town employees could get their 2.5%, and they said no. Do you know the new teachers are budgeted to make $466 a day? Suggestion of a BLM week and indoctrination of white guilt books. Illegally changing public comment policy. Overpriced legal team, $100 more an hour than the town. FOA request in an actual lawsuit I recently filed in Cumberland County Superior Court. Scott Poulin and Jeff Porter as defendants. Irresponsible use of federal taxpayer funds for an amphitheater and park benches while teachers' simple requests to fix their windows go unanswered. Illegally taking down back to 5 lawn signs. The leading Facebook comments on the MSAD 51 page. How about no prom for your seniors? A rite of passage taken away. A few years ago now, asking for a $40 million brand new school. So as parents, what leverage do you have and what power do you have over the government? Here's how you do it, and it's going to take a lot of work, but it's for your children. Tax payments until MSAD 51 opens real time, all time, full time. Replace the 3 open school board seats on 6-8 with critical thinkers. Recall all the other school board members, Tyler McGinley, Mike Williams, Jennifer Stewart, Peter Bingham, all of Cumberland. Budget on 6-8 for the first time in history. Have the new school board fire Superintendent Jeff Porter and then vote no on the school referendum. Remember, it's not my job to wake up the sheep. It's my job to wake up the other lions, and there's a solid pack forming. I'm very proud of you, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, was there anybody else who wanted to speak during the general public comment? Doesn't look like it.
Okay, thank you. Andy, can you just speak? I meant to do this earlier, but because we have such a large group, can you speak to the process of how you've collected people to speak to make sure that nobody's confused on how to be recognized?
Yeah, so I collected everybody who emailed requesting to speak into a spreadsheet. I'm just going to go down that, read off your name, and if you're here and want to speak, that's your time to speak. You'll have 3 minutes. And if you don't respond, I will swing back around after everybody else is gone to see if somebody has come in or has solved microphone issues since I called them out to speak.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to also mention that we will be prioritizing residents to speak first. So if there are people that do not live in our 2 towns, you will be at the end of the list. All right. So moving on to communications, I don't believe we have anything. Is there anyone from the board that would like to share something for communication? Okay, seeing none. We will move into presentations. The first presentation will be from the Getting to Green Advisory Group, which is a progress report. So I will I'm not sure who's leading this, maybe Chris Hoffman. I will pass it off to you.
Thank you, Tyler. Indeed, it is I. Give me just a second to present a tab, and I'll get us started. Okay, hoping you can see the introductory slide to a presentation. So, indeed, thank you to the members of the board for hearing our presentation tonight. We are here representing the district's Getting to Green ad hoc group, which met 3 times for a total of about 6 hours over the course of the past 2 weeks to consider the district's charge to explore how to reopen schools in full as soon as possible. And before we go any further, we'll just allow each member of our smaller presentation team to introduce themselves. My name is Chris Hoffman. I am a principal at Greeley High School and representing the district and school building administrators. And we're joined by a few other folks. Pete, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Pete Gillingham. I'm 8th grade social studies teacher. Cassidy, would you like to go?
I am Cassidy Dean, and I'm currently a sophomore at the high school.
And we were originally slated to be joined by a parent representative as well, Kate Colby. Kate is busy celebrating the 6th birthday of her young child, so we don't have her with us tonight, but she did record a video message that we will include as a part of our presentation. So I'm going to advance our slides and turn things back over to Pete to tell you a little bit more about our work.
Thanks, Chris. So we were given a task. The goal was to bring a recommendation to the MSAD 51 Board of Directors for a plan to transition the district to green as soon as it is practicable to do so within the parameters of state health and safety mandates, which is a challenging task to do in a very short amount of time. This was the process we went through. A committee was formed. It had 5 parent reps, 5 teachers, the administration, 3 of the staff members were also parents in the district, school psychologist, school doctor, nurse, 2 students, 3 board members. Quite a big group, but it brings a lot of different perspectives to the table. And there was a facilitator to help guide our work. We met 3 times. The first time planning what we needed to do as a big group to accomplish this task. The second time we went over plans and the thought process of getting to different plans from administrators. The April 1st meeting, we had an opportunity for all of us to go around and share our points of view on those plans. We've included for the board the agenda and the meeting notes, which are public. The meetings were recorded for folks to hear and see. In between the second and the third meeting, we had a doc where we tried to do a lot of our thinking work ahead of time to save time in our meeting, where we put questions and thoughts and things we were wondering about to get feedback, and we've shared that as well. And in our last meeting, we took several votes to get us to the recommendation that we will be sharing with you now. And I think it goes back to Chris.
Indeed. Thanks, Pete. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of the key information sources and data that the group was basing its work on. First, before I get into that data and information sources, if anyone watching tonight's meeting hasn't found the public information, the recordings of our meetings, the notes from those meetings, etc., those are all on the district's website under the banner Getting to Green. So you're welcome to take a look there as you watch tonight's presentation if you haven't already seen those things. There's potentially 6 hours for you there if you want to go back in time to do that later. So as a group, we considered, in addition to our perspectives and experiences and a whole lot of insight from different folks, really sort of 3 primary sources of information. The first was a survey taken by the district that is shown on the right-hand side of the slide, asking questions of parents, staff members, and students in the district about their preference for returning schools to green under different circumstances. The first question, under the circumstance of if there are not changes made to the state's distancing requirements, And the second question, if there are changes, the removal of those distancing requirements. And I'm not going to go through that data. That survey data itself is also available on the district website. The second key source of information that guided our work was the requirements for reopening schools itself. The state's 6 requirements for reopening, including physical distancing, symptom screening, masking, hand hygiene, use of PPE, and in-home isolation and practices for return to school or work, as well as the state's guidelines and special considerations for other unique circumstances in schools. That was a key piece of information behind our work. And lastly, as Pete mentioned during our second meeting, each school principal, including myself, gave a presentation about the opportunities, challenges, barriers, choice points for what it would mean for the schools to reopen in green immediately or as soon as possible. And so those pieces of data and those information sources were sort of the key things that we drew on in our work. I'm going to turn things over to Cassidy to talk about the votes that the group took.
So the first vote for the group had 3 options, which was to continue in hybrid, add students in the greatest need, and then return in full green. There were 11 votes for continuing in hybrid, 8 for adding students in the greatest need, and 5 for returning in full green. And after the first vote, it was decided to combine the first 2 options into one, which had hybrid, most students remaining in hybrid, and the rest of the students struggling being added to a cohort C. And there were 20 votes for that and 4 votes for returning in full green. And the 4 votes for returning for all green were from parents. And the other 20 votes were made up from some parents, administrators, and students. And the final recommendation is to add students in greatest need to 4-day attendance in the cohort C.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassidy. So given that overarching recommendation, there are certainly different perspectives within the committee. As Pete mentioned at the top, this was a large ad hoc group with diverse membership, and we're doing our best tonight to represent some of the key perspectives on that recommendation. And I'll share first the sort of summarized administrative perspective, which is really just that for most schools, the resource costs and sacrifices to reopening in green generally seemed to make that option prohibitive in terms of what's in the best interest of our entire student population. Just to give you a quick rundown of what the group discussed at length. At Mabel I. Wilson School, for example, the bringing all students back in green would likely mean necessary changes to programming, including the possible losses of RTI services for students, as well as changes to or reductions in allied arts programming. At the 4th and 5th grade school, returning all students in green would likely mean that students would necessarily change teachers at this point in the year. At GMS 6-8, the process of bringing all students back to school would likely mean that many students would experience at least about a third of their time in a passive learning environment in a large cafeteria space as overflow, given that those students couldn't necessarily fit in their classrooms. In addition, for grades 4, 5, and 6 through 8, eating lunch would be particularly challenging. Students would necessarily eat outside in all weather conditions as a part of reopening in green in full. And for me at the high school, a little bit of overlap with other schools, but the cost of reopening in green would likely mean an increase in the number of students who don't choose to come to school at all and necessarily access school fully remotely, which has proven very difficult for many of our learners this year, as well as ultimately the opportunity cost of not being able to focus our energy on those learners who need our support the most, given the transition and energy required to shift curricula and instructional planning for all our students in our classrooms. District-wide, there are also concerns about the time required to rearrange and move a significant amount of furniture and find adequate storage for that, as well as the impacts of returning students to green on their ability to come to school at all in the event that we had positive cases that would require quarantines, and impacts on our nursing staff for the requirements for contact tracing given possible positive cases in the schools. So that is my best effort at a brief synopsis of what district administrators shared as a part of the committee's work and our ultimate perspective on the challenges to getting to green. Cassie?
All right, so based on the survey data that polled students grades 6 through 12, 59% of the students wanted to remain in hybrid, and 11% wanted to increase attendance for selected students, and only 30% wanted to go fully green. The data from the survey supports that the majority of students feel it would not be beneficial to fully return to green for this school year. There are definitely some students who are struggling with hybrid learning. Some feel as though they are missing too much instructional time with their teachers. And some are also suffering socially and mentally because of the reduced social interactions only being in the building 2 days a week. However, that is not true for the majority of students. Many believe that the options for going green right now, such as overflow spaces, would not be beneficial to learning. As overflow spaces would get students in the buildings, it would decrease the participation in remote classes. Having students in a room together and expecting them to participate in their classes is very hard. Currently, when students are at home, they are able to raise their hands, ask questions, and fully participate despite not being in the building. But with overflow spaces, that participation decreases. Many students also believe that it would be an incredibly difficult transition to make. And especially with only 7 weeks of school being left after April vacation, it doesn't make sense for students to have such a large transition for only a small amount of school. The third quarter just ended at the high school, which means that students have gone 3/4 of the year in hybrid learning and they are fully adjusted, and adjusting to a whole new way of learning again would not be beneficial. There are also concerns with spacing in classrooms. Some students said they would not be comfortable having 16 or more students in a classroom. And there's also safety concerns and the issue that more students would choose to go fully remote, and going fully remote is much more difficult than hybrid. And it would just take away all in-person learning from those students. And Mr. Gillingham, your turn.
Thank you, Cassidy. From a kind of a teacher's point of view and an educational staff point of view, I wrestle with the concept of getting to green versus normal. We all hope that, and we know that someday we'll be back to normal in the future, but a plan to going green is not a silver bullet. Each plan has its pros and cons, which need to be weighed. I think teachers have valid health concerns in the pandemic and worry about academic losses if they have to transition to a new possible model. There were many creative plans that were shared with pros and cons, and I don't want anyone to walk away with the idea that the administrators did not share creative, out-of-the-box thinking with many options. Each grade level and building has its unique challenges. I'm assuming the board has watched the videos and the principal's presentations of the different plans, and you can hear and you can understand many of those challenges. The CDC Spacing Guideline is one of those challenges. It's a stumbling block. Extra space and staffing would be needed for many of these plans. Getting kids under one roof should not really be the goal, but designing a model that provides the best academic and social growth should be our goal, and I don't think we can really do that until we're in a safer environment. There are some medical concerns. We discussed things around lack of herd immunity, blending the cohorts, variances, current outbreak statuses are all concerns that have come up. I would like to thank the staff who have worked so tirelessly this year to keep us in yellow. I worry that some of these plans might accidentally push us into a red. And the red zone, I think, has negative impacts on students' progress through the curriculum. The hybrid / cohort C expansion that we're recommending is supported by the stakeholders' data. I feel when you put the yellow and blue together by the parents and the staff and the students. The proposal allows for less transition and I think less academic setbacks. It keeps IEP and RTI supports in progress, which are being successful at this time. It maintains the successes of hybrid learning. It allows certain grades to keep developing concurrent learning, where many classes are now working 4 days a week with their teacher. The cohort C allows us to expand for more academic and emotional support. This will be offered 4 days a week, and this is helpful to the students who are not being successful under the hybrid model. I do want to stress the survey data, and then that many teachers, I've had over 30 teachers come and talk with me and email me. But when you look at the data, I think there's a strong argument to be made that going green at this time is not what many of the stakeholders would like, even though it's a controversial topic and there are many that would like to go green. I just would always wrestle with the fact, what does green mean? The devil is in the details. I think also this allows us to, the district to develop times to go green in the fall, and I haven't heard anybody, students, teachers, staff, but the board members I've spoken to that would like to be in hybrid in the fall. I think people would like to be in green. I know this is a very complicated issue and it draws on a lot of emotion, but I do feel this is the best decision at this time moving forward for students' academic growth, emotional and physical health. I recognize it's not a perfect model. I'm not sure we'll find a perfect model in a pandemic, but I would respectfully ask the board to consider the committee's recommendation. And if at any point in time I can help sharing my point of view, having listened to those committees, I'm more than available to. And I was going to hand it off to Kate, who's at a birthday party, but we have a video. I think Chris is going to work his magic and show us.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Indeed, we worked with Kate to create this presentation, and she was sorry not to be here tonight, but enjoying the birthday party indeed. So she did submit this video that I'm going to play for you now.
The parents on the committee are appreciative of the opportunity to share our perspectives.
We expressed concern that we were underrepresented on the committee, noting that all votes in favor of in-person learning were from the parent reps. The survey results strongly indicate that most parents want their children back to school full-time. We believe that schools are safe. The US CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Maine CDC, and the Maine Department of Education all support open schools. Few COVID-19 cases have been associated with in-school transmission. Young children are less likely to become infected and transmit the virus to others. New case rates have been consistently lower in schools than in the general population, and most school staff will be fully vaccinated by May. Additionally, risk to children and staff could be further reduced if children don't have to attend multiple childcare settings and activities, often in other towns where there's greater mixing of cohorts than would occur in school. The parent reps are deeply concerned about the mental health of our children and our community. We worry that the schools may not be able to fully recognize the effects of remote learning on the mental health status of our children and families that we've been experiencing over the past year. We recognize that staffing shortages and lack of space are among the district's biggest challenges to meeting the Maine DOE and public health requirements. But we propose several creative solutions and agree that an independent study could be even more successful. school staff and administrators express concern about reduced education quality and access to services due to required compromises if there is a return to in-person learning now. Parent reps believe that quality and access to services is already being compromised by being out of school 5 out of 7 days a week, especially given that many families don't have the option to work from home and are unable to oversee or assist with remote work. Finally, we're concerned that there won't be a return to in-person learning in the fall if we don't begin to bring students back and plan for that now. Some of the reasons and conditions cited for staying hybrid, such as high COVID-19 case rates, staffing shortages, building space, distancing requirements, are unlikely to change by September. Other districts have successfully begun to open more fully, which shows that it can be done.
And just our final slide, outside of the recommendation that we shared before and the perspectives that you just heard, we also wanted to include some additional thoughts that seems to rise to the top of the group's discussions. These are not things that the group took any action on, but just seems to be prominent in our discussions indeed. The first point is just that each school, given the recommendation that came out of last Thursday's meeting, has already begun preliminarily considering what it would mean to add students to Cohort C for 4-day access. The group, as Pete mentioned, everyone in the group was fully committed to a green reopening in the fall, and there were some questions about how to get there. One such question was about the role that parents in the community can play in the planning process. I think there was a sense that this particular group at 25 or so folks in one group was perhaps not the most efficient way to continue that planning, but several members expressed an interest in a collaborative approach to that green reopening. And there were several folks who, as Kate mentioned, asked for an independent space study to be considered so that the district could consider ways to maximize space through an independent audit. In addition, one possibility that came up was just finding ways now, even given the recommendation, to continue in the hybrid model while allowing additional students to join Cohort C, of creating unique opportunities for social learning for students who might need additional time with peers, especially outdoors, at times that might allow for maximum socialization, as well as seeking spaces to allow for unique and creative solutions, which might be helpful to allowing more students to join that 4-day Cohort C group. And the committee also repeatedly discussed staffing shortages, not just specific to COVID, but in general, the need to address that need moving forward seemed essential, and several members of the committee expressed concern and desire to support the district's efforts in getting to a full staff. So that is our best attempt to summarize our work in brief, and the three of us are happy to take any questions from the board that you may have.
Thank you, Chris. So I will open it up for the board. I guess the best way to do this is just raise a hand and I'll call on you if you have questions, and then we'll have, I wonder actually if we should hold questions till after we hear from Dr. Chuck. Okay, I'm seeing a couple head nods. So our district doctor, Dr. Chuck, are you with us?
I am.
Okay. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Let me sort of give you a little bit of an update. And again, you all read
well, so you know much of this information, but there's lots of good news on the front, and there's some bad news that I think very much influences the decision that we're making today and looking forward. The good news is that we now have very effective vaccines, and as of tomorrow, the 7th, from age 16 and older, they'll be available to that age group. That does translate to the fact that our juniors and seniors by the fall, a significant proportion will be vaccinated, and that will be a huge asset. There are studies that are starting for younger kids between 6 months and 15 years of age. Those are going to take a long time to finish, and the reality is that for that enormous portion of our student body, they really will not be fully vaccinated until next winter. One of the big problems on the horizon is that some of the variants, particularly the B.1.1.7 that comes from the United Kingdom, is increasingly more contagious than anything we've seen before. And in our country, Massachusetts and Michigan are already getting slammed with this particular variant. There's epidemiologic research that's even questioning whether the 3 feet separation that the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics has said is very safe, whether because the contagiousness of what is expired and because the children will not be, at least the majority under age 16 will not be immunized, whether that puts it at higher risk for infection rates within the school systems. Right now, 30% of all hospitalizations are age 45 and under. That's a huge change. The elderly group is definitely being vaccinated well. The 75% of everyone over 65 has had 1 dose anyway, so that's a great start. 50-year-olds and older were the ones who were primarily dying in the state of Maine, and that's where the concentration started with vaccination. But the bottom line is that we are not out of the woods, and some of the discussion about could we please push everybody closer together, it could be an enormous health risk because these new variants are just not playing like they should. They're much more contagious. They're much more dangerous. And I think that's the crux. There's lots of other issues out there. The good news is that traveling restrictions are going to be lifted. The idea of travel passports will be, now 14 organizations in the US government, talk about redundant expenditure, who are figuring out how to make a travel passport so we can go freely between states and between countries. But I think one of the big issues medically that's getting a lot of attention in the literature is, although kids, quote unquote, have been safe, relatively speaking, this new variant, which is going to be all over us, it's spreading like wildfire, is a potential real danger for kids, a real danger for kids. And the serious illness and hospitalization rates that we've not seen in younger children until they're vaccinated, which will be next winter, puts us at high risk. And the whole comment about the more we open up, the more theoretically we're going to be putting ourselves at risk for going red. I think that's real. That's real. And we just at least need to keep that in mind. I can answer other questions if you want.
Thank you so much. Okay. So now that we've heard from both presentations, I'll open it up for the board. So just raise a hand and I'll call on you if you have questions. Kate Perrin.
I think this one is for Dr. Chuck. I mean, we are hearing about the other districts in our area, and I know there's a lot of differences between our buildings and our staffing ratios, but we're hearing so much about what other districts are doing. I know that you're also working with these other districts. They are adding additional bodies in their classrooms. So what makes them different, and are they making the right choices in terms of safety?
That's a good question. Let me start with Falmouth in particular. Falmouth, after an enormous amount of discussion, has decided that at the end of April vacation, they're going to bring in elementary school, mid-May, middle school, and June 2nd, high school. Now, that is basically what they're trying to commit to. The feasibility of how they're going to get there is very much in question. There's nothing cast in stone at this point. And there's so many reasons why, not the least of which has to do with the staffing question. There are people who've been out on medical leave. There are people who've chosen not to come to school this year because of concerns about the COVID infection rate. Those hurdles haven't changed, and there are no replacements out there. You can just quickly pick up a phone and say, I need 3 more teachers, 4 more special ed people. Could you send them over tomorrow? So Falmouth has a timetable, but I can tell you right now, there is no guarantee they're going to be able to adhere to it. They are working very hard, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough.
Jennifer, and just as a reminder, this is questions from the board only at this point.
Thank you, Tyler. My question, I think, would probably go to Chris, and just if you could speak a little bit on what Cohort C would look like. I understand that the high school has tapped a few students so far in having them come back on Wednesdays or getting some additional support. Is it still kind of, I would assume, in the process at all schools as to what that would look like? And, if there's busing or how long of a day, is there still in the planning stages?
Thank you, Jennifer. So indeed, at the high school level, we've already invited close to 40 students back to 4-day attendance, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, using our student support team and a variety of academic criteria to determine eligibility for those invitations. And I know that is unique. At the high school, we have the most space available to us to allow for additional students to join us. The other buildings have begun preliminary planning for what this would look like for them. With broad strokes, this would mean that students at each building would mix with students in the other cohort, at least to some degree, as 4-day students. Each school would use some sort of similar team approach to reviewing student eligibility and making those eligibility and identification determinations. Is possible that for some of those students at other buildings, particularly K-5, the hours of their school day as 4-day students might not be the same, and that is a function of the difference in programming for those students, as well as the possible need for additional bus runs to get those students to school. And pretty much across the board, I think administrators hoped to develop those plans individually based upon the needs of students, so that their 4-day attendance did not result in an overly repetitive experience, but that it was really targeted to the needs of students, whether those are academic or social emotional. I hope that provides a snapshot, Jennifer.
It does, Chris. And I think one comment that should just be out there is that we do have some students from the beginning that were in Cohort C that were attending more than 2 days a week, and just so that we all kind of understand that as well. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris and Jennifer. The next hand I see is Elias.
Yeah, so this is more science-based, but when, say, looking at the potency of the variants that are out there, is that, and I guess this is more for Dr. Chuck, but is that something the science is confident on, or is it just speculation over the potential danger that those present compared to the regular COVID-19 virus?
No, it is scientifically bona fide. It's for real. And what that really translates to, a way to think of it, is that the larger droplets, which generally speaking fall to the ground by 6 feet, and the aerosols, which are much smaller and can go as far as 14 feet, per quantity of fluid have more virus that is more resistant to our normal immune system. And so they're much more contagious, and that's the problem. And that was the bad surprise that the medical world discovered, was that these are not behaving like the original COVID-19. So it's a real issue. and it's a real concern for unvaccinated individuals. Europe is really getting hammered with this. The two states I mentioned, Michigan and Massachusetts, are already seeing rapid rises, and these are in younger people who otherwise were doing fine. So it's a real concern, and until we get everybody vaccinated, this is why if you get a chance to be vaccinated, or any family member does who falls within the age bracket that's allowed, please encourage them, because those are the people who are going to get, they're going to do fine. Those who are not vaccinated are going to get potentially very sick.
Thank you. Good night, you guys. Sorry, had a bedtime interruption. Madison, you were the next.
Yeah, so I just have a question about expanding cohort. So if we expand cohort C to include whether it's just students that need more instruction or IEPs or whatever, would that, I have two things, I guess, but this is the first one. Would that increase the chances of us having to shut down like entire cohorts or even the school? Because we've had times where we've had to shut down just A or just B. But if we get a C case, like a really big cluster of C cases, does that mean that the whole school will end up shutting down? And does it make it like more likely that that will happen?
I think I can take that one, Madison. I think, as I mentioned before, certainly at the high school, students in cohort C, especially those recently added, are generally, they had previously been in either A or B and are now attending 4 days and are thus crossing between cohorts. It is certainly possible that if a student were to be positive across multiple cohorts, that could expand the number of students that might need to be quarantined and identified as close contacts, if there were that positive case, and if that number were particularly large and staff were impacted, then it's possible that we would need to close or go red. Yes, and that's why I mentioned that pretty much every building there would be some degree at least of cohort mixing.
Okay. And then I just had another kind of basic comment for, I guess, parents to understand. We're all here online today, and I think that it's interesting that a lot of, particularly parents, have gotten mad at board members because of they're not doing enough. But we're online today because we couldn't feel like we had enough space for people to be in school. And I want everyone, I guess, because I noticed this and it kind of upset me, was that this is how students are going to start feeling. They're going to be in packed rooms with other kids. And a lot of students, we heard the statistics, don't want to be back. But that's just something I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Madison. I see Anne's hand.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I realize I'm not sure if this is the best venue, because I know, like Chris, you had talked about those other future steps, planning steps that might come up, but not necessarily from your group. Particularly, I'm interested in how we can help get our students together safely outside of school, to have, like, even if it's like say my son is in Mrs. Fluette's class, cohort A, if I could get cohort A kids together on Thursday, Friday, when cohort B is in session, so that they can still see each other and, get some fresh air and still be safely distanced. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but I guess I don't want us to lose sight of that. And so I guess I really appreciate that you had brought that up as a suggestion in the ad hoc group. I listened to the meetings, I heard how everyone spoke to each other, and there were a lot of great things that came out of it. And thank you everyone who's here who served on the committee, because I really appreciate that time that you put into it. I guess for me, I'm feeling frustrated that our previous administration didn't handle things differently when COVID first came, and that we're in the situation that we are now. With Dr. Chuck, I was also curious, so you spoke to Falmouth and their challenges. Can you also speak to Bonnie Eagle, though, since they're also a joint, SAD, I don't know if there's any other similarities or differences that we have with them.
Yeah, and I have to plead somewhat ignorance, but my understanding from our last meeting is that Bonnie Eagle is going to let 2 grades go to green, not the full school. And I cannot remember. I think one is an elementary grade and the other is, I believe, a high school grade. But rather than everybody in, they're just trying to regulate the numbers that will expand and control that as best they can. And I apologize. We're meeting again at the end of this week. I'll find out more. But again, the same struggles. But that was their way of trying to contain the volume of what they'd have to deal with for the remaining school year.
Sure. Do you know, are there buildings as crowded as ours are, or as old as ours are?
No, it's a good question. The high school is quite large. The elementary school is new, but it's enormous. And the spaces within the classrooms, I don't honestly know whether they're going to be able to accommodate more than 16 or 18 with the spatial requirements. So that may be why the high school and the elementary school, the two where they're going to just grab 1 grade and say, let's give it a go, and not the middle school, which is much smaller building. But again, I apologize if I don't have all those answers. I just know it's going to be a very confined experiment.
Okay.
And the other piece, just quickly, if I may, the other piece of this is, and we don't think about this so much, but the more that we open up the schools, the more we have to deal with all of the mitigation issues on buses.
Yeah.
And the traffic that all the parents are going to say, I don't want my kid on a bus, and you're going to suddenly have thousands of automobiles coming through. I mean, we don't really even think about that, or how are we going to feed them and where are we going to feed them? So a lot of these pieces are above and beyond the issues of the science. I do want to say, Elias, to one other thing, if I could, because this is actually very important to know. As of the current time, serious illness has increased to the point where almost 1 in 5 individuals is now 18 and under. That is completely new. That is totally new. 1 in 5 new infections that's deemed as serious are high school and below.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Dr. Chuck. I see Margot's hand. Oh, not anymore. Go ahead, Margot. You're muted, Margot.
That's me warming up. I too wanted to express my thanks to the large Getting to Green group. I watched every minute of your meetings and read the notes, and thank you, Chris, for being really faithfully able to capture what was going on. I read the notes first and then watched, so I felt like I had a good head start. I was beyond impressed with the ability of our administrators to creatively try to engage Getting to Green. It was quite an exercise, and I think that we asked the right people to take that on, knowing what it takes to provide a good public education for all students. I think that it's really challenging to get beyond what's happening in our individual experience, and I really appreciated the broad perspective of the group overall. I learned a lot, and I really respect the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Margot. All right, I'm not seeing any other board members' hands raised at this time. We're going to have a chance as board members to discuss before we vote, and that will come after hearing from the public. So right now, I'd like to open it up. Oh, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do that right now to you, Tyler. But scribbling notes furiously as everyone was talking. A couple of questions, Dr. Desai. The perception, one of the things that has come up in the community a lot is viewing being back in school right now as a potential dry run to the fall. And I hate that term. And I would like to see us fully enrolled in September. But you just made a comment that said with vaccines cascading across the younger folks, that wouldn't be concluded until winter. Does that mean that you would have hesitation with September potentially?
I think what that means, no, Kevin, you're right. I mean, this is Dr. Fauci saying this, because it takes just quickly as a background to that. Although the studies are about to start in the youngest age brackets, which is 6 months to age 11. The data won't be available and the data won't be approved until months from now. And so late fall and into winter is what Dr. Fauci says will probably be the time they will come up for their turn. So I do think mitigation measures will still be very much in process. But the hope is the adults will be dramatically, the numbers will be dramatic with regard to who's been vaccinated. You're still going to have adults who say, I'm not doing it. There are even, first responders who refuse to get vaccinated. But that's the real plus. And then you'll start to, in particular, the 16 and up high school kids will be vaccinated if they choose to do so. So it's gnawing away at the whole thing.
So
the problem, excuse me one sec. The problem with this disease is the information changes every single week, every week.
So potentially, and my apologies for interrupting, Doctor.
No, I'm sorry to do that to you.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's a moving target. Let me ask you a question. My colleagues had asked about other districts that you're working with. So it's Bonnie Eagle, Falmouth. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, Baxter Academy for Science and Technology. They have kids from 60 different towns, which is unbelievable. So they have been fully remote all year and have no intention to bring kids back, with the exception of small groups like the robotics team, which has worked out a way to be socially distanced adequately to be safe while they work, because they literally assign one kid to a program and another kid to an engineering piece and whatever. But they're not going back until next year. They haven't even discussed it. Parents, again, are hammering on the door, but for a whole lot of very good reasons, trying to bus kids from 60 towns, some who want to come, some who don't, some change their mind. Not going to happen there this year.
But then when you look at those other districts, if we talk about Bonnie Eagle or we talk about Falmouth, is it that you were making the same recommendation as you are here and they ignored that? Or what was, I mean, I'm not asking you to put words in their mouths, but what was that conversation? And should it be something that a board member says, well, let's go the different way than your expert advice?
Well, let's start with Falmouth. Falmouth had a board meeting till 1 a.m. with no moderator within the last 3 weeks. And the result of that was exhaustion. And there were, unfortunately, grenades thrown throughout the room. And I think, quite frankly, and I was not present for that, I was in Boston, but what I heard subsequently from everyone involved, including Jeff Bruno, was that they decided to at least set some dates as goals to aim for. And that's what came out of that meeting. Bonnie Eagle, they decided, the administration sort of kept working on their own to figure out what they were doing. And again, 2 grades coming in seemed to be acceptable. The other thing Bonnie Eagle does, Falmouth does not, we do not, is the Binex Now testing. And that's been done not for kids who have symptoms, which is where it may end up, but Bonnie Eagle is doing it for essential workers, quote unquote, teachers who are determined to be close contacts, who quarantine outside of school, but are tested every day they come to school to make sure that when asymptomatic, they in fact are not carriers. So there's another leg up that and I think there are 80 school districts around Maine that are doing that out of I believe it's 160, but I'm not totally sure about that. So that's another piece that we will discuss, that all of the school departments will discuss. And the nurses are in meetings across the state every week with Emily Poland, who's the Department of Education liaison with the CDC. So they are cross-fertilizing that information. I think that had something to do with the Bonnie Eagle decision.
Okay. So my final question relates back to Bonnie Eagle. When they're bringing 2 grades in, is that 2 grades at a time? Is that a static group, or does that change?
No, no, I'm sorry. Yes, it's going to be for the end of the year. As I understand it, it's going to be each of those 2 grades right through June. No,
Okay.
no more additions, not this year.
Okay.
It's basically kicking the tires to see how do we make this work in a controlled fashion, which makes sense. If you're going to do anything, you got to sort of just go slowly.
Okay, Violet. Thank you. That's all, Tyler.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay. So we'll move on to public comment for comments obviously related to this presentation. Same rules apply, 3 minutes. I'll do my best to keep everybody on time in the most awkward way possible. And so Andy, I'll kind of give this over to you to kind of manage the speakers as you have them on your list.
Okay, first I have is Sean McBride.
Thanks, Sean McBride, Cumberland. The quote going back to green, unquote, subcommittee should have been named the Blue State Partisan Support the MAA Effort to Stay Hybrid Model at All Cost Committee. No intentions of going back to green. What we heard tonight is a lot of what ifs and lots of BS and short on facts. This administration looked to create solutions where no problems exist. Equity over the last 2 years, but did not create solutions for where problems really do exist in scholastic inequity. Because of this administration's horrible choices, your kids have less emotional intelligence than their peer group. They may be years behind their peers because of lack of creativity and lack of resources available throughout the town. These Greeley graduates will one day be competing for jobs with other young adults that were not held back by hybrid models, anxiety and depression, and thoughts of suicide. That is, if these kids make it to adulthood, God willing. Blood will be on Jeff Porter and Tyler McGinley's hands should more Greeley students decide to hurt themselves due to anxiety and depression placed on them by this totalitarianism administration. And yes, I said more Greeley students. And the amount of parents that have either pulled their kids out of Greeley, are homeschooling, or are sending their children to financially infeasible private schools should make this administration cringe, but only if they really cared about your kids and were not using them for their own political gain. Of the MEA Teachers Union, my understanding is she's a Greeley teacher currently out on leave for fears of COVID. Her last line in her recent president's alert was, quote,
I'm sorry, Sean, you are not allowed to speak about our personnel. This is a public comment about getting to green recommendation.
Okay, sure. The
Comments on
MEA,
that, you can continue.
I'll take like 10 seconds back. The MEA quote was, we look forward to the time when the virus is under control and hope that our communities do all they can to that end, unquote. The fact is this virus has been under control from day one, with stats coming directly from the main CDC website. 45th in the nation for COVID cases per million, 45th. How many teachers in Greeley are over 80 years old, where 59% of the deaths have occurred? Let's assume 0. How many over 70? Let's also assume 0. 94% of the deaths with COVID are in these 3 groups, 60, 70, and 80 years old, 94%. If you're a teacher over 60 and don't feel comfortable, I bet we can find another teacher to fill your $466 a day slot. That's harsh, but real. Florida and Texas have had no issues. That's pretty unusual. And still after a year, no one in Maine under 20 out of the entire state student population has died with COVID. 0. There was one child who committed suicide, however. Do you want that to happen here? The fact is the Maine average death per day is almost exactly the same in 2020 as 2019, 41.28 to 41.05. Health, it's clearly for the teachers, and it's gaslighting based on the need for Democrat government control. Facts don't matter here. Jeff Porter and Tyler McGinley are not critical thinkers.
Your time is up, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Joan Guild.
Good evening. I'm Joan Guild, Cumberland resident, parent of 3 Greeley grads, and a teacher at Greeley High School. I would like to respond to the public push to return to in-person learning in the next few weeks, and specifically to the Back to 5 social media posts attacking the leaders and staff of MSAD 51. Unfortunately, educators are well aware of these posts and accusations that we are to blame for the plight of parents or even for the conditions in which we are currently teaching. The cry to do better, give more, try harder dismisses what students, teachers, and administrators are doing every day. We are adhering to rules and optimizing learning. The misinformation about our leaders and district's goals and intentions hurt us in the classrooms. They hurt our schools and hurt our community. Creating division does not support education, nor does it support our students. No one disputes that full-time in-person learning is best for students, and 100% in-person unrestricted use of classroom space is the model that educational staff miss and yearn for. Time and again, this commitment has been questioned. Teachers and leaders continue to put their students first, often above the needs of their own families. And they do so despite the loss of their once staunchest allies, parents. One 20-plus year veteran teacher at Greeley High School believes that some parents have forgotten that we are on the same team and we want the same return to normal for our students. One MIW teacher shared that teachers, quote, "don't feel like our voices are being heard, and I don't really feel that we are being supported. We have taken surveys that are then called a conspiracy. We are hearing tons of negative comments about our work, even though we are working harder than we ever have. As elementary teachers, we have gone from hero to zero," unquote. Loss of parent support has hurt all of us. The pandemic has been exhausting, and I am deeply sorry that educators, school board members, our superintendent, and administrators alike have been blamed for circumstances beyond our control. And connecting to all of the above, but more directly related to your action item tonight, I will leave with one last teacher's comment that encapsulates what others have asked me to share. This is from a first grade teacher at MIW. "We have established a known routine, both with staff and students, and have been working extra hard with little time. Please respect our profession and our professional opinion that going green now will be a huge adjustment with tons of changes and adaptations once again. Students will lose interventions that they are possibly getting currently. When looking at my data, we are seeing the same level of mastery that we have in the past. Thank you for your leadership and for respecting a process for the decisions ahead, not just this spring, but for the least disruptive, celebratory, and full return to school next fall."
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Joanna Warzicki.
Hi there. Thank you. And I want to just start by commenting that, I know this is a very controversial issue, but I do want to start with saying that I appreciate all the hard work the teachers are doing. And so while I'm going to bring up a lot of counter opinions, I want you to know that we really do value and appreciate all the hard work. I know that it's double duty this year. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Joanna Warzicki. I'm a mom of 5 children in the district, ranging from kindergarten all the way up to 10th grade. I'm also an OBGYN, and so I do have some medical training as well. And I'm also personally touched by COVID because my sister spent more than 2.5 months in the ICU due to COVID, and actually just went to rehab actually today. So I certainly take this virus seriously, and I really do. But I think I've said this, I was lucky enough to be part of the Back to Green committee, but I feel though that, I know Dr. Chuck brought up a lot of the science, but I feel like we're looking at the wrong science, because we're looking at the science for COVID in general, instead of saying, what does the science show about COVID in schools? And there have been lots of large studies over the course of this year that have shown that it's really safe to go back to school. And so I really know that, last year we closed down schools, and even in the fall, it was in the best interest of protecting everybody, and we didn't have this data. And we were worried that schools would become this source of outbreaks. That really hasn't. And so, there have been studies, out of North Carolina that, a large study showing, that there were absolutely no student to teacher transmissions, looking at over 90,000 people. There was a large study, in Sweden, and Norway as well, that looked, thousands and thousands of, students and teachers, and found that the rates of transmission in schools were much lower than in the community. And so I would appreciate if we would focus less on this sort of discussion of what ifs and these variants and all this kind of stuff. If we're going to be talking about that, let's talk about that in how we address the rest of society, because that's really where COVID is spreading. And then, I think that the hard part is that while the teachers are seeing a lot of consistency in terms of their schedule, a lot of routine, we're not seeing that. Okay. I have to work, a lot of working parents are professionals. I have different people watching my kids, helping with homeschool. I don't get to be a part of that. It is heartbreaking. I'm told that my kids are often done with their online learning by 9 a.m. It is certainly not what I would expect for a kindergarten or third grade, second grade rather, curriculum. And it's not because of the teachers. The teachers are doing absolutely their best, but it's because, that they have to allow for variance in the ability of kids to access these curriculum. And so I think that, while I was part of the committee and I did see the hard work that went into it from the teachers and administrators, I think that more focus was on the idea of, should we do this? Does it make sense?
Your time is up. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Thank you for understanding.
Yeah.
Paul Whitmarsh. Oh. All right, we'll come back to you. Aaron Sassville. Okay. Jody Wyatt.
Hello, my name is Jody Wyatt. I live in Cumberland. I have 2 kids in the schools. I was part of the ad hoc committee. I appreciate everybody's effort towards it. My professional experience is I've been a corporate attorney. I've served as the attorney to many large Fortune 100 companies. I've also served on the board and as counsel to professional sports organizations. And this was my first look at the Cumberland board, the ad hoc committee. And I have to say, I was really taken aback. I thought it was rather a kangaroo committee that had its ultimate outcome already determined. I was rather saddened to have experienced that. And I think ultimately we are here for our kids in our schools. And I just did not see any critical thinking outside the box that was receptive. We need to go back to green. I would highly recommend to review Kate Colby's presentation, because I think she captured the parent takeaway very well. We see what's happening to our kids at home on a daily basis. And I don't think that what I saw from the ad hoc committee, there was an appreciation of what is actually happening to these children on a daily basis in the homes, that for whatever reason, the hybrid model, it does not work. And our children are hurting. We are hurting as a community. We are going to feel it long-term in our community if we don't step it up. When throughout history, we have been put to a challenge, people have gone on and dug in and made it happen. And I just don't see that here. I see excuses. I see apathy. I see mediocre is okay. And that's just not acceptable. We need more for our children. If you don't feel safe sending your kid to school, there are options for you. Please take those options. We're not asking anybody to do anything they don't feel safe with. But let us, who are willing to take the risk, willing to use mitigation measures, send our kids to school. We're going to have to start putting our kids in private options, moving districts to have our kids educated. And I'm just really sad for our community. And I ask you, please, mediocre is not okay. We're better than that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Will Sachs. Will, you there? All right, we'll swing back around. Next is Rebecca Puente.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Pruenti. I'm here tonight to talk on behalf of Greeley Middle School's Modern Language Department, representing myself, Chris Sutherland, Susanna Wood, Natalie Romero, Emily Bogner-Williams, and Catherine Lane. We are in support of the Going to Green ad hoc group's recommendation to remain in the hybrid model as is. We're proud of the language proficiency that our students are demonstrating this year. Our students have really hit a stride and have been working hard all year to get input in French and Spanish, both on their in-school and their remote days. They're meeting and sometimes even exceeding language standards throughout this pandemic. With a small amount of time remaining between April break and the end of the school year, and given the challenges that a typical spring and summer entails in terms of maintaining engagement, we feel that it's asking too much of our students to maintain the high expectations that we have for them academically while undergoing another big transition. In the last year, our students have already transitioned to surprise remote learning last spring, then to the hybrid model in the fall, and then to full or partial concurrent live streaming as teachers rolled out different use of technology throughout the spring. And we really value our students' emotional health and hope to minimize their transitions and to continue to build relationships through our classes that support social and academic learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gretchen McCloy. Gretchen? Okay. Erica Cole. Jason Record.
I guess. I appreciate what you guys are doing. I apologize for anything that comes across as unprofessional. You guys are in a tough spot this year. A few things, other people will say a lot of the details better than I will, but I'll say that life is not 100% fair or 100% safe, I should say. And I would ask you to give us the choice for us that want to go back and are willing to take the very, very small risk. I'd also point out to those that have to work in the buildings that the risk to me is a very, very small risk for the teachers or the people that work with the children versus for me, in my mind, a much greater risk to the kids and what we're doing to them long term. I'll say too, I'd love to see less divisiveness with the teachers. People are not bashing the teachers. Every single conversation that starts out about the teachers starts with, we love our teachers. But here's a bit of an analogy as I was driving home today. Even if you had your most favorite electrician and plumber, you love them to death. If they just showed up half the time and the other half of the time while you were building your house, they were working with you via Zoom and over the phone and trying to get you to run the pipes and run the wires, even the kindest person would run out of patience at some point. And we've got an awful lot of buildings here that are half built and they are exposed to the weather. And these are very important buildings, and I mean our children. So I would ask you to really think hard about coming back to work for the greater good, I will say, and for helping our children. Also, transparency, I think, could be better. And the way that the data, in my mind, was twisted is ridiculous. That survey, the way that it was published, kind of shows very different sized groups wrongly. There was 5 times as many parents as there was staff, and 4 times as many parents as students, and the graph did not represent it that way. I thought that was deceptive, and that was disappointing to see. 2/3 of the parents really do want to go back to school and try to do something this year, and I think that work is really worth it, even if it's only for a few weeks. And I get it, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. So I would ask you to turn down the recommendation of the committee and get back to work and make it happen. And no is not an option. Just make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Chamberlain.
Hi, yes, can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
My name is Jess Chamberlain. I'm from Cumberland. We have 2 sons at Mabel I. Wilson, grades 1 and 3. I want to start by saying that I've been a vocal supporter of Mr. Porter and our school board over the last few years. I appreciate and value the service they provide to our community. Knowing a few members on a personal level, I have the utmost respect and admiration for them as human beings. I cannot emphasize enough how much I support and truly treasure our MIW teachers and teachers as a whole. I had the honor of being raised by one of the absolute best, a kindergarten teacher for over 30 years. Over the last year, we focused a lot on the toll this is taking on our children's mental, social, and developmental health. We have talked about how challenging this has been and remains to be for our beloved teachers. We talk about the impact of income inequality and the very real and enormous inequities based on race. For my part tonight, I would like to focus on women, specifically mothers. I do so in recognizing and applauding the single dads, the stay-at-home dads, and the families who have been able to figure out a 50-50 partnership as it pertains to remote learning and childcare. When compared to pre-pandemic levels, women are reporting higher levels of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts when compared to men, particularly when looking at women with school-aged children. For women, binge drinking is defined by the CDC as 4 or more drinks within a 2-hour period of time. A March study published by NPR concludes that binge drinking is up 41% in women, and alcohol-related liver disease is up 30%. When compared to pre-pandemic levels, potentially life-saving preventative care and annual screenings are down among women. The greatest drivers being fear of COVID transmission, not wanting to overwhelm the healthcare system, and of course, lack of childcare. There's not nearly enough time to get into domestic violence, but let's just say that the findings are terrifying. As a bridge to my last bullet point, I would like to note that economic independence is a critical factor in overcoming domestic violence. Lastly, women have been fighting for equal opportunities in the workplace since the 1960s. While the models may vary, our country's economy as a measure of jobs will begin to rebound. It's already happening here in Maine. If our public schools are not able to offer full in-person learning, women will once again be put at a disadvantage in our efforts to seek equal opportunity and equal pay. Mr. Porter and members of the school board, the women of our community need your allyship. Our children need their pre-pandemic moms back. Mothers who are free to follow their dreams. Mothers who can contribute to the workforce in the way that we choose, not those chosen for us. Mothers who are able to model the best of who we are to our children and refocus on serving our communities and advocating for the causes we feel passionately about. While I fully acknowledge that there are very real challenges in returning to school, I wholeheartedly believe that there is a path forward, a path that will not be perfect, but one that is safe and is science-based, a path that shows our children through our actions that their sacrifice.
Time is up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Douglas.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Douglas here. I live in Cumberland. I have 2 kids in the school system. Full disclosure, my wife works for the school district as well. I want to start by just thanking all of the hardworking people at MSAD 51. I want to correct a misperception that I've heard around about the community. I want to assure everyone that the employees of MSAD 51 make every effort every day to be open. And if they are not open, if the school has to close, that is because there was just no other option. And so anyway, I want to thank the hardworking folks, and I think we all deserve their gratitude for dealing with a very difficult situation as best they can. I would love to see my kids back in school full time. I think we all agree that that's the healthiest thing for everyone. But in considering, all of the options and all of the evidence, I have to say that the best option is clearly that which was recommended by the ad hoc committee. If we look at it from a cost-benefit analysis, right? The pros, I think, from the back to 5 folks, are that we get our kids back in school for a few weeks. My understanding is that what that will amount to is actually 12 days. 12 extra days of school. I think that's the benefit, right? We get our kids back in and they get 12 extra days. I really don't know what the other benefits would be. I mean, they get to see their friends and so on and so forth. What are the cons? The cons are numerous, right? It sounds like there are going to have to be a number of really significant changes in order to get our kids back to school full-time for those remaining 7 weeks, 12 days. Schedules are going to have to be altered. Lunch is going to have to be altered. Bus schedules are going to have to be altered. And, you know, we've heard some comments about how this is going to be stressful for our children. I thought that this conversation was mostly supposed to be about what's best for our kids. We heard survey data stating that I think almost 60% of the kids that were surveyed would prefer to stay in the hybrid mode, right? And I have to think that that's at least in part because of the added stress and the added routines that will come with going back to green for just a few days. Finally, I just want to note that, you know, Dr. Chuck raised some really interesting data about some of these new variants that really nobody has addressed. There is a new variant out there that is spreading like wildfire in Massachusetts, just a couple of states over. And it is spreading among young people more furiously than what we've seen before. And that needs to be taken into account. All things considered, I think this is a no-brainer. I think for the benefit of having our kids go back to school for 12 days, 7 weeks, versus all of the detriment. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Brandy Wells. Brandy Wells. Okay, Magdalena Farley. We'll swing back to you. Jill O'Connor.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jill O'Connor. I'm a resident of Cumberland, and I'm the parent of 2 students in Greeley Middle School. I want to start by thanking Dr. Porter, the principals of each school, all of the teachers and staff members who have pivoted and who are doing the best by all of our children. And I would like to thank this school board, who is doing a great job in their volunteer roles for our community. I have been impressed with the thoughtfulness and fullness of the communication this year. I recognize that we're all exhausted, you can hear it, but I fully support allowing the administrators and teachers to drive the action around how and when we should make shifts to the model we're using. I find it incredibly frustrating that other parents are claiming to be worried about the children as if the superintendent, principals, teachers, and staff are not, and do not have the welfare and best interest of the children in their care at the very front of their minds. This relentless insistence to go back full-time and return to normal, it's not helping an already fraught situation. And the idea of normal is elusive during a time in which nothing is as it was, and there is no such thing right now as normal. To say we're tired of a pandemic, we're still in it. Returning to school with a close your eyes and jump mentality will not help our kids. Letting the district administrators and teachers thoughtfully and intentionally put structures in place to allow for the most successful school experience possible, that's in the best interest of our children. How can we say over and over that we love our teachers, we respect our teachers, and then say we know better than them how to do this giant job? The hybrid model is not what we would have wished for our kids, but it's been the best possible solution under the circumstances, and we have made it work. It's working okay for us, and I wanted to be a voice to say that it is working okay for us. It's brought routine. It's allowed my kids to stay connected to their teachers and school. My kids like the small class sizes when they're in the building, and they would be devastated to lose their teachers or be shifted to class in the cafeteria. The hybrid model has opened up opportunities to pursue other interests like baking and Minecraft building and running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign and things they wouldn't have been able to do. They play outside, they read for long stretches of time, they craft and they create. I felt the need to speak today because I have read through all of the Go Green Committee minutes. I've watched the videos, and I saw that they were in agreement that maintaining the hybrid model is the most supported by those people whom we have all entrusted to steer this educational ship. So I agree and support their recommendation. And I want to say at this point, someone mentioned digging deep. Let's keep digging deep. Let's go past our own particular situations and try to put our opinion on other people, and let's let the people in charge do their jobs because they're doing a good job. So thank you to the school board for giving me a chance to share my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Quirk. Okay. Morgan Cohen.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Morgan Cohen. I'm from Cumberland, and I have a kindergartner and a fourth grader. I am a concerned parent and also a supporter of teachers. As of today, April 6th, my kindergartner has been in school in person for a whole grand total of 53 days. 53 in-person school days. Only 53 out of the 175 on our school calendar. That means my kindergartner has only seen his teacher for in-person instruction for 30% of his kindergarten year. Many people have spoken tonight to say that we're nearing the end of the year, and why change now? Instead of seeing the time left as a glass half empty, I choose to see this time left as a glass half full. If students were to return to 5 full-person instruction days after April break, it would mean that they could have access to 35 in-person school days for the remainder of the school year. If students were able to return 4 days of in-person instruction after April break, that would mean they would have access to 29 in-person school days for the remainder of the school year. And if students were to stay hybrid for the remainder of the school year, which in my opinion is a disservice to our students, they would only have access to 14 in-person school days for the remainder of the school year. Think about that. 5 days each week would yield 35 in-person school days, and 4 would yield 29 in-person school days. And staying hybrid, which I can't even believe that this is still an option, would yield only 14 in-person school days. To me, these numbers are staggering, and every day of in-person learning counts. Everyone continues to say that they're committed to going green in the fall, but how can this even be true if the restrictions all remain the same? We can't seem to figure out how to get students back to 5 days now. How could we possibly be able to do it this fall? Will we magically have bigger classrooms, or will we have more staff? Or is this virus so smart that it will decide to leave Maine in the fall? It may sound silly, but how can we put all of our eggs in one basket without having a practice round, at least for the springtime? Thank you for your time, and I certainly hope you reconsider and figure out a way to get our students back to at least 5 days after spring break.
Thank you. Kate Levesque. Kate. George and Karen Spino.
All right, I'm George Spino of Cumberland. I'm a father of 4 with 3 of them in the school system. I guess I'm okay with going hybrid for the rest of the year, but I have real concerns about us able to go green in the fall without doing some kind of effort this year. If Governor Mills has not lifted distancing, masks, plexiglass barriers, time limits in the classroom, we're going to have to deal with that. We really need to have a plan. As was pointed out, Falmouth is going back. You know, they've got a plan. Sure, there are challenges, but you know what? They're trying. Scarborough is planning on possibly using Scarborough Downs next year to have enough room to meet all their students' needs. We cannot have another hybrid year, and I fear without putting in more effort this year, we're not going to get there. I know that's the plan in the fall, but we need to think outside the box. Hair salons don't have to have social distancing, and they're cutting and washing people's hair. I think we need to allow our children to be in school. If families don't want it, there are plenty of other options. We've got remote learning, you've got homeschooling. There's plenty of COVID shots available for those who would like that too. It's rolling out there. You can get it if you need it. I have real concerns as well about the makeup of the Return to Green Committee. And I understand that you've got a lot of different stakeholders that you wanted to get on there. But when the results of that survey came back, that should have raised a red flag that we need to reevaluate membership. The graphs as they were presented had 1,336 parents, 271 staff, 323 students. The graphs were shown as a percentage, not an absolute number, which means you need 2.25 parents to equal the vote, if you will, of one staff or student. I think that's a poor way to represent the data. And you see this when you have these heavy opinions and these hurt feelings, this further extends the division that is really sad to have in our community. There are a lot of voices to hear, but seeing the makeup in that community, especially when you look at the graph, I'm hurt and I'm disappointed. I'm not really getting the impression tonight that there's a motivation to get back to school. And I wonder, why do we have a school? Should we be funding vouchers? And I'm going off on a tangent because this is silly. We have an awesome school. One of the reasons we moved to this community. These are things that we're going to have to address. I get that there are variants and they're changing. Coronaviruses, they change quite a bit. I'm sure, those in the medical field know far more about this than I do. And we have to deal with those as they come. This board needs to be upfront with us as members of the community, what the plan is for next year and how, if we're staying hybrid this year, we have any hope to get back in green to the fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Patrick Strawbridge.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Strawbridge. I have 2 children at Greeley High School. I'm a resident of North Yarmouth. I just want to say that I think that the last comment from Mr. Spano really captured a lot of the concern of the parents in this community, which is that there's a lot of lip service and a lot of discussion about the possibility that we want to get back to green in the fall. There's very little in terms of hard metrics, hard targets, descriptions as to exactly how we're going to accomplish that. And indeed, a lot of the concerns raised tonight for a reason as to stay into hybrid are going to apply equally in the fall, which leaves a lot of us feeling like there's not a dedication. This community and this administration appears to have been reactive rather than proactive in thinking about how it could go back to green. I think some of the data that has been presented, unfortunately, is a little selective. Some of the variant data, for example, the scientific studies available to date indicate that the variants, that the vaccines do a good job of preventing variant infection. It's why the United States is actually doing better on the variants than a lot of Europe is right now. I also think that there's very little information that suggests that although the variants may lead to more cases among young people, that it actually significantly increases the number of serious illnesses in young people. But again, this could be allayed if there wasn't a feeling that parents were being marginalized in the discussion, that requests to view tour school facilities were not turned aside, that we were not as proactive. And I don't think that the people of this community really accept the notion that school districts such as Yarmouth, such as Freeport, such as Kittery, such as all the school districts in New Hampshire, all the school districts in Massachusetts are putting their kids at risk, or somehow that the teachers and the administrations in those districts or the school boards don't value their children or don't listen to the science. There are ways to get back to green. You have an army of parents who would be more than happy to put in whatever time is necessary to help move furniture around, to make whatever accommodations are, but they do not feel like their voices are being heard. They do not feel like the challenge to working parents, to parents who do not have extra homes or snowboarding activities or grandparents available to take care of their children 24/7 are being valued. They don't feel like they're being heard. And it is up to this board to lay awake all night and do whatever work it is, including pushing back against administrators and teachers who they may value and trust and work closely with, to do whatever it takes to get to the goal as soon as possible, the goal being full 5-day-a-week instruction. Those are the hard questions. That is the hard work. And it remains to be seen whether this district is committed to doing it in a way that will convince the community that they share the goals of the parents and the goals that everybody else says they have. We love our teachers. We've had a good experience in this school district. There's a reason why this group did not come to fruition until this point in time. It's because there's a perception of a lack of urgency and planning, and it needs to be corrected by the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Bach-Elder.
Hi there, Lori Batholder, North Yarmouth. I'm not even sure I can follow what Patrick said. That was amazing, Patrick. You speak for all of us. I did write something, and I may have to go off script a little bit because, again, what Patrick said, I think it was just really well done. And that is really how we're all feeling. And so I'm new to the community. I'm new to the school board meetings. I really thought that whatever I say is going to be heard, but the more I listen and the more that I see and hear in this community, that all I hear are excuses of why we can't go back and not how do we go back. And I really feel sitting here, even talking to you right now, that whatever I say is not going to be heard. So I'll just start by saying some of the facts that I really want to educate parents of the things that I've learned. Like I said, I'm very new to this, but I think there is not a lot of transparency going on in the school board. I'd like to also start by saying that this last minute decision to change the meeting to virtual, I think is unacceptable. I think some people thought that it was better because more people could be heard, but that's not the case. Per a governor, we're safely allowed to be at 50% capacity, and that would mean roughly 250 people could have attended this meeting, which I highly doubt would have happened. But the school board should have gave us an option for those that wanted to come in person, we could, and for those that wanted to go virtually, they could do that. It's just a simple giving us that courtesy of being in person. I think with all the upset parents regarding back to 5, and I think the board knows it, I think the last minute switch to a virtual meeting was really about hiding behind a screen so you didn't have to see all of us. And basically it just adds insult to injury to the parents that are already feeling that we're not heard. So I do want to just take a few minutes to state some facts because people are making really good points, but the facts are what are getting me, and I think parents really need to understand some things. One of the facts that is concerning to me is that some well-intended parents tried to work with the administration on providing input how we can overcome the 3-foot distance rule by asking for blueprints of the school and asking to do a walkthrough so they could help with the input on that and assess the space. And that's the reason we're told we're not going back to school. Those requests were denied by the administration. The Getting to Green Committee was formed, and it was suggested by Jeff Porter that the request to enter the building should be brought forth by the Getting to Green Committee, and so it was, only to be voted down by the administration. As of today, no parents are allowed to enter the buildings to assess the space and how it is being used and if we can accommodate the 3 feet spacing needed. Also, each board member was recently asked if they themselves have been in the schools to measure. Each of them answered no. So parents, we need to be asking, why can't a few masked parents enter the school after school hours to help assess the space and how we solve the 3-foot distancing? Why are we not being allowed in our schools? Is there something to hide? Fact number 2, in numerous emails from Jeff Porter, he suggests that parents, teachers, and excuse me?
You've hit 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Philbrook. Michelle. Okay, Brandon Cohen.
Hey there. So you already heard from the smarter half of our family, so I won't take up a whole lot of time. I was on the committee as well that everybody sounds like they've watched and reviewed. I think I would focus my attention now, and especially for the parents, on asking about the fall. I understand everybody's desire to go back and that there are no other options, but I think what we're going to need to see is an actual plan. I actually talked to the governor's office today, and apparently the DOE has space consultants available free to districts that they go in and they help plan the space. I don't know if that's been done or not, but I think that should be done. If not, I think we need to look into hiring, space consultants to take a look. I think the other thing that I would just say is that, the division is real, and I sit on 2 boards, and I think part of the job of the board is to figure out how to bring all the sides together, and some of that is listening. So I would put that back on the board as well to, figure out how to bridge some of that gap, because, there are frustrations all the way around, it sounds like, and as long as those frustrations are there, it's just going to keep, the tension's going to keep going, and no one's going to get anywhere. So I would, put some of that on the board to figure out how to make, some outreach to some of the other parents that are frustrated. It's not just back to 5, it's a lot of other parents that aren't part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Orlando.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt Orlando, Cumberland, Maine. There's been a lot of parents who have expressed my point of view. I actually wasn't going to talk tonight originally. I've spoken at a couple meetings. Frankly, was deflated. Felt kind of defeated by the results of the back to fire, or the green, whatever it's called. I did watch the meetings. I guess what I struggle with is I've shared my son's situation. Both of us work, my wife and I. We do our best, but I think you hear the teachers speak, and a couple things. I have never once doubted that our teacher is an amazing teacher. We have Miss Galley. She's awesome. We love her. It's never been about that. I do think some of the teacher presentations focus on the learning in the class. And as parents, we're seeing the other 5 days. And I think that was mentioned by somebody. And that's the thing, right? Like, so when we go to college, we talk about, and all of us here can probably raise our hands how many times we've said that the thing that we remember most, or, we learned economics, but really it was the interpersonal, the life learnings that you get. That's what we're seeing as parents. We're seeing kids regress 2 years emotionally. And I can only speak for a kindergartner. And then I think about what I'm going to tell my son 15 years from now. History's going to look back on this. We haven't seen something like this in 100 years. And we may not see it for another 100 years. You think back to World War II, and we celebrated with triumph when we won. Yeah, you think about the civil rights movement. It's the people who had courage and bravery to stand up and say, listen, something's got to change, that we think about, not the people on the sidelines comfortable. And I feel like as a district, we need to look all of ourselves, myself included, in the eye and say, are we just riding this out, or are we really standing up and making change? Are we putting every day a significance on the importance of education? Because I tell my son every day, you listen to your teacher, you ask questions, and you focus. And we ask him every day, did you listen? Did you focus? And did you put all of your effort into your school day? And so for us to just mail in 2 months and just say, you know what, the data, it's about, life is about trying your best every single day. And you just got to take it a day at a time, a step at a time, a play at a time, whatever you're doing, and you got to give it your all. And I don't think we're giving it our all. And that's why I'm so frustrated. And so when I look at my son in 15 years from now, I want to say, I gave it my all. I voiced my opinion. I wanted your future to be everything I possibly could give you. And now it's in our hands as a community to decide, are we doing everything we can possibly do? And I know
Matt,
the
your
time limit
is
is quick.
I'm sorry.
I'm probably almost there. What
Yeah,
I would
your
say,
time is up, Matt. I'm sorry.
can I say one thing? Because I know I got heated. I just want to say, think about the JFK quote and not ask what the country can do for us, what we can do for our country. I think we need to stop asking what the kids can do for us through their social, emotional, mental well-being sacrifices, and start asking what we can do for our children.
Thank you.
Sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh McHenry.
Good evening. Can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to speak on behalf of our family that we are in support of the Going to Green Committee's recommendation. There are certainly valid opinions on both sides, but I think in this case, we absolutely just have to follow the experts and make the safe choice. And in my mind, the courageous choice is to stay the course, keep the kids safe, and take the time over the summer to be prepared for the fall when we can return to a more normal school experience. It's certainly, the hybrid model is not anything that anybody wanted for their children. It's certainly, not optimal, but I think we are doing the best we can, and we're not quite out of this pandemic yet, right? I mean, we're close. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but we're just not there yet. And it certainly doesn't feel safe to us to try and jump the gun before we are actually ready. So I just wanted to voice our opinion, and thanks for the time.
Thank you. Amy Hale.
Hello, my name is Amy Hale. I live in North Yarmouth, and my husband and I both have children in both the high school and the middle school. We fully support the recommendation of the Going to Green ad hoc group, as well as the survey preferences of students and staff to remain in hybrid instruction mode for the rest of the year. No one, not Superintendent Porter, not the school board, not the teachers union, not the Getting to Green committee, thinks that hybrid instruction format is an optimal way for students to learn, nor for teachers to teach. That is not the issue. The issue is, can MSAD 51 follow main CDC requirements and deliver in-person 5 days per week education? At this time, MSAD 51 cannot meet these requirements. Being patient does not mean doing nothing. Until we can meet those requirements, there is still work to be done. As a community, we need to do what we can to stop the almost weekly emails announcing additional cases of COVID present in our schools. As a school district, administrators and teachers will need to determine the learning gaps across grade levels and then plan and strategize how to address them. The impact of this pandemic and the cultural shift that we have all experienced over this past year will be felt for years to come. We can leverage what we've learned and then adjust our way forward. There is no magic dust in the hallways of our schools. Having our students cross the threshold of our schools every day won't make things go back to the way they were or bring them to where they might have been. Instead, let's face the reality of where we are, spend this time getting our community as healthy as possible, and provide our professional educators the time to make plans to optimize the academic, social, and emotional experience for our students this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Began.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
My name is Nick Began, resident of Cumberland, and have 3 daughters in the school system. My wife and I moved to Cumberland in 2016 from Freeport solely for the school system. I was always impressed with the fact that Greeley ranked top 5 in the state and had a great reputation, not only for the education, but also the sports. I can say that our experience with teachers in the district has been nothing short of amazing. With that said, I must admit over the past few years of being here, I did not pay close attention to the inner workings of the school board, nor did I ever challenge the school budget. I mean, it's for the kids, right? As a business owner and father of 3, I was busy and did not stop to take the time to really understand how the school board functioned, let alone make decisions. Last summer and early fall, I thought the administration did a great job of preparing for a year that would be full of unknowns. However, as we progressed through the year into February, I started to get concerned that while other schools in Maine and neighboring states were opening, we were still status quo with our hybrid model. The last few months have been eye-opening for me, and now I'd like to share some of the things I've learned with the parents that are listening in tonight. Fact, the superintendent and board members never had the desire or intent to move out a hybrid model, nor have they worked toward a plan to do so prior to just a few weeks ago. A plan should have always been in place. Fact, another parent and I were approved to do a school building walkthrough in mid-March in a meeting that we had with Jeff and Tyler. The purpose of our request was to see if there were creative opportunities for classrooms, as we kept hearing, we don't have enough space. After approval of this, they went back on their word just a few days later. After seeing some of the pictures released yesterday, now I know why. Fact, in the same meeting we got approval for the walkthrough, I had a request for specific data around staffing issues and space issues. I was confirmed by Jeff that they had this data and they would send it to us. We've yet to see any of this data today. Fact, schools are operating safely all throughout the state and the country, yet we choose to remain closed and not look at any creative solution. Fact, several grades could go back to school right now with the current distancing guidelines, as they have the space and the teachers. Fact, several teachers and parents are afraid to speak up as they are fearful of retaliation. Why did the board go back on their word for the building walkthrough? Why did the superintendent not accept parent services when he continuously says he's open to such ideas? Why did the Going to Green committee vote down the walkthrough? Why is it okay to play sports, but we can't have our kids sit in a classroom? You say the survey was not biased, but in fact it was. I've confirmed this with multiple data scientists. Let's face it, the school committee is broken, but it's not broken because of one loud parent who's going after the board for the past several months. It's broken because we have a leadership team who is silencing the parents and lacks the ability to lead and think outside the box. I can face the fact that children would remain in hybrid model this year if we exhausted all options. But when I hear that we don't have enough space and I see 2 large rooms full of furniture, I can only think about all the other missed opportunities we have yet to look at to get our children back in the classroom. I implore the parents who are listening tonight to speak up and get involved from this day forward, because the old saying, "It takes a village," could not be more true given our current situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Woodcock. Jack.
Good evening. I'm Jack Woodcock. I live in Cumberland. I have a 2nd grader and a 4th grader in the school system. The pandemic has brought into relief so many aspects of our prior lives that we took for granted, and one of those is the role that school plays in our children's lives. It's so much more about education. It's about their social well-being, and the teachers and the administrators play such an important role in that. And the gratification that we have and should have for those should be brought to the height of what we think this should be at this moment. So thank you. We've heard a lot tonight about the effect of lack of in-person school on children. I think it can be summed up in one word, and it's elementary. It's elementary that this, particularly for young kids, the psychological development and their lack of school has deprived them of something that is really just fundamental to their development. But there are also profound equitable principles at play here. There's the promise of public school, which is a remarkable promise. And that's one that everyone, regardless of their background, their income, nationality, income, or race, is afforded an equal opportunity to learn. And the pandemic has unfortunately broken that promise. Outside school, students are subject to very different learning environments. And those environments also probably lie on the lines of fault lines of income, race, nationality, and education level. And this will continue as long as kids can't learn in the same environment. And the role that school plays in our community adds another equity issue. It's the parents that are shouldering the burden, and particularly it's women who have borne the brunt of the lack of in-person school. Forestalled careers, or even worse, lost jobs. Jessica Chamberlain said it far better than I could, but it is worth reiterating. The effects of women on lack of in-person school are profound. And so limiting in-person school has not had a major impact on our kids, but society at large. And given these grave issues, I hope the district does everything in its power to return kids, particularly elementary school kids, to school as soon as possible. The needs of the kids and the community at large demand that every effort be made, every resource of this community is leaned on, every talent is tapped to make sure that the kids can go back to school as soon as possible. That's the standard that should be applied by the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Benham.
Hi there. I'm Jennifer Benham. I live in Cumberland, and I have 2 kids in the district, and they're both at Greeley Middle, one in 4-5 and one in 6-8. I wanted to give public comment tonight to voice my support for the work the superintendent, school board, administrators, and teachers are doing to support kids and families this school year. I'm so incredibly disheartened and saddened by the intensely personal attacks you all have had to endure this year at the hands of members of our community. And I want to make sure that you know that your work is valued and that you are appreciated. I hope you know that there is a very large portion of our community that supports you, is grateful for your continued advocacy for our kids, and wishes the dialogue in our town could be kind and respectful, even in the face of differing opinions. I have watched all 3 ad hoc advisory meetings and was impressed by the level of commitment to working through difficult conversations with respectful dialogue. This type of engagement has been sorely missing in our parent community as of late, and it buoyed me to see respectful collaboration amongst all stakeholder groups in the face of differing opinions and emotional topics. The steadfast commitment of administrators, teachers, nurses, social workers, the superintendent, and board, many of whom are also parents, is so abundantly clear, as is the passion of the parent community. It is possible to be civil and respectful and commit to partnerships, even when you are not getting 100% of the things you are hoping for. I won't restate the details that were considered in the ad hoc meetings. I really do hope our community sets aside time to watch them in full. I will just offer my support for the majority consensus of the group and the preference to remain hybrid for the remainder of this school year. For many reasons, I agree with their assessment and think this is the most prudent path to take at this juncture. I have 2 middle schoolers participating in the hybrid model, and believe me, I'm looking forward to the day when they can return to school full time. But as I consider the ramifications that a full return now would have on all students, not just my own kids, staff, administrators, nurses, I cannot in good conscience support anything other than remaining in hybrid for the remainder of this school year. Again, thank you very much for your dedication and commitment to our kids and community. I have nothing but the utmost respect for your perseverance and patience, especially this year. I really need to believe that brighter days are ahead, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Geary. Daniel? Right.
Yeah, hang on one sec.
Sure. Daniel, why don't we come back to you? Eliza Backelder? Eliza, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm Eliza Batchelder. I live in North Yarmouth. I have 2 kids at MIW and a third who's like just counting down the minutes until she can get on that yellow bus. First, I want to thank the board and Superintendent Porter for the tireless work that you have been doing since last summer to ensure a safe school year in a pandemic on certainly unprecedented in our lifetime scale. And there's no handbook for this, and you've all risen to the challenge, and we're just so grateful. I also want to thank my kids' amazing teachers. They have managed to really see and appreciate and connect with my quirky little kids, even in a challenging year. And my kids feel safe and loved in their classes, and they would be crushed to have to be moved to a different class or have to learn in a hallway or in a cafeteria. I'm the first to admit that hybrid has not been fun for us either. My husband and I are both former teachers, but teaching our own kids is a whole different ball game. Not a ball game I'd like to keep playing next year. But with all of that said, with cases on the rise, new variants, we absolutely support the decision to remain in hybrid for the remainder of the year. We want the board to focus on making sure we can be back to green in the fall. I think that's where the board's time and energy should be going right now. I don't want us to rush back and end up in red, and I certainly don't want us to have big outbreaks in the community and possibly lose some of our community members. I just, kids may not be as impacted by COVID, but kids' parents might be, or their siblings might be. It's not. We have to look at the big picture, and it's a whole community. It's not just whether the kids themselves are being, transmitting COVID. But yeah, we're in a pandemic. We're not out of the woods. I understand and share the frustration. I'm ready for the pandemic to be over, but I think we need to keep in mind that it's not quite over yet, and focus on a return to 5 days in the fall. And thank you again for all your hard work and for doing a virtual meeting, because I was not about to go to a crowded performing arts center like a week before my vaccine. throw it all away. So thank you.
Thank you. Diana Gillespie.
Hi, my name is Diana, and I live in North Yarmouth. I'm a parent of 2 children, ages 6 and 8, who attend Mabel I. Wilson. Before I begin, I do want to say that I have felt intimidated to share my opinion against some of the louder voices in our community, and to speak to a comment that I keep hearing. The government should be the ones helping us work and figure out childcare, not the DOE. It's a failure at the top, not at the DOE. I fully support both the school board and the ad hoc committee. It seems lately like those in opposition of the hybrid model have the loudest voices, but I do not think they represent the majority of the parents or students at MSAD 51 district, which is made obvious by the survey results sent out by the school. I want to thank our teachers and all of the staff who worked so hard to offer our children the best education they could under such extraordinary circumstances. In no way is a hybrid model of education a replacement for full-time in-person learning, nor was it ever meant to be, but it's a great alternative to keep our children engaged and learning during an emergency like a global pandemic. I believe that rushing reentry into full-time learning does not offer the school administration enough time to properly prepare, nor does it provide students the time to acclimate to a new schedule and adjust social situations that they may not have engaged in for over a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Wright.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I have 2 children at the high school, a freshman and a junior. And I would just like to start out by saying that I'm kind of astonished that people think that requesting full in-person education is not supporting the teachers, the administration, or the schools. I have offered my support to this school system for the past 12 years by giving you 2 kids who come to school whenever it's available to them, ready to learn, disciplined, and they work hard. And so what I'm asking from all of you as on the board, the administrators and the teachers, and I've always had a very good experience with the teachers and the principals at our schools, is to do the same. I expect from you to do your best, to give it everything you have, to quit making excuses, and to find a way. I don't see how the best high school in the state cannot figure out how to get those kids back in school. There are ways. You can use the space consultants, as Brandon recommended that the DOE has. You cannot just make excuses and say, that's not my problem, or we've got other things to do. It is very possible, and I think the best way to support you guys is for me to have high expectations for you. It's the same expectations I have for my children. It's how I told them to get to school. If they have a problem they can't figure out, we work on it. We figure it out. And the final thing I'd like to say is that this is not hurting my kids so much because they're traditional learners and I'm a stay-at-home mom and I can oversee all of their work and make sure they're doing it. But this is really hurting the single parents or the families economically struggling. They can't afford tutors. They can't afford to make up for this lost time. If you want social justice, they need school. They need that extra support that the school provides. And it's shameful that we are just putting them off and not getting their kids back into school. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Geary, you ready?
Yep.
Go ahead.
All right. All right, so I don't know. I guess I'm just here to, I'm not really have much to talk about, but I'm kind of just going to talk about some information I found recently. People might already know about this, but if you don't, then this might be interesting. And that is about the COVID cases at the surrounding schools that are going back 5 days a week. Now, I think a while back, yeah, our school tried to tell everyone that Yarmouth and Falmouth both only had like 1 or 2 cases. Yeah, that is a horrible lie. Yarmouth currently is standing at a total of 39 cases. They currently have 2 active cases right now. But the one interesting thing is how little people they actually quarantined every time there was a case. At most schools, they only ended up quarantining about probably like 8 to 13 people. It actually wasn't that much. Meanwhile, here we end up quarantining half the entire school the second someone sneezes. And next we'll move over to Falmouth. Yeah, Falmouth has a ton apparently. And surprisingly, they're somehow still going 5 days a week. Falmouth is, if I'm reading this graph correctly, they're sitting at a total of 139 cases. And that's among the entire 3 schools they have. You could average that out to about 46 cases per school. And again, they are still going back 5 days a week. I wasn't really able to find our case for some reason, because for some reason, we just don't share information. I also found stuff about other schools, cases, and stuff like that. A lot of these schools actually don't currently have that many. They really only have, most of them have less than 5, which most likely just accumulates to 0. Now, basically, what am I getting at here? Why is our school essentially so nuclear, for lack of a better word? Why are we just shutting down the entire school the second someone gets a case? I mean, that's kind of my question here. However, it's actually kind of simple if you were to think about it in a way. The school, in a way, could be trying to push their own agenda. The fact that supposedly our district isn't that safe. And, you know, by quarantining half the entire school, they're essentially trying to show people that, hey, our school is a mess. And, you know, there's no way we could possibly go back with these conditions and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Boothby.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm the parent of a 4th grader. I'm a Cumberland resident. I'm going to cut this short because there's so many of us, but I just want to say that I agree with the recommendation made by the Going to Green Committee. And I also want to thank the doctor for addressing concerns about variants and children and public safety. I'm here also to say that I'm not represented by the Back to 5 group, and I'm absolutely disgusted by all of the ugliness thrown around on Facebook groups. And I just don't know how you all do it as school board members. I honestly don't. I don't know how you take that kind of abuse. You too, Jeff. Hats off to you. And I just want to speak to the something that I can speak about is that 2 years ago, I had the fortune of being on the Elementary Education Committee to address the overcrowding issues. And that seems to be forgotten. People don't think that, you know, going back to 5, the overcrowding isn't going to magically go away. The space has been evaluated 6 ways to Sunday. That committee was so thorough in evaluating the options and every inch of space that the district has to offer. That's the only thing that, you know, I can speak to that I have experience with is that the whole space issue and overcrowding that already existed pre-pandemic. The administration is not sitting on their hands. There's no nefarious conspiracy to hide spaces so that our kids can't go back to school. I am tired of hybrid. I'm tired of all this, just like everybody else is, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my child's safety or anybody else's. So I agree with continuing in the hybrid mode for the rest of this year, and we can work on options to safely go fully back in the fall if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Soul.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Jennifer Soul. I'm a resident of Cumberland, and my 2 children attend Greeley Middle School, grades 5 and 6. We're actually very proud to be a 3rd-generation Greeley family. And while some families had the opportunity to send their children to private school this year, we chose not to pursue this option. We believe that Greeley offers the best education for our children. My husband and I both believe in the strength that a community brings to the school system and also what a strong public school system brings to a community. I personally have several pre-existing conditions, which has led me to be very cautious over the last year. The reality is we are clearly still in a global pandemic. And if you had asked me in February if I was comfortable with going back to school 5 days a week, I would have absolutely said no. However, now I have a different opinion. Science and data confirm that minimal transmissions are happening in the school. And thanks to President Biden, any teacher who chooses to be vaccinated can be vaccinated immediately. My concerns are now focused on the mental and physical well-being of our children and the decline in learning expectations. By lowering the bar on testing targets set for the district, it may be difficult for us to rebound in order to retain our status as a top public school in the state, which I believe we all take great pride in. Parents are tired and getting visibly frustrated. I am sickened to see the frustration escalate into anger, personal attacks, and calls to riot. I absolutely do not condone or support these aggressive approaches, but I can understand why parents are frustrated. You know, we hear that space is an issue, and then we see these horrendous pictures circulated on social media of excess space that's not being considered to use. We also hear that there's a teacher shortage. And with the availability of the vaccine, I'd like to understand when we can expect our staff that are on paid leave to return to work so that we can avoid the additional long-term cost of substitutes. This frustration is exacerbated by the fact that many surrounding districts have been able to figure out how to get back to school at least 4 days a week for some portions of their community, just in different age groups. You know, we do not need to be a divided community. And behalf on the numerous families that support going to green, you know, I absolutely see all sides of the subject that have been presented tonight, but I do ask the school board to vote in favor of more in-person learning after April break, and to also make accommodations for those families who would prefer to continue in remote learning mode. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and your consideration tonight.
Thank you. Martha Legatt.
Hi, my name's Martha Leggett. I live in North Yarmouth. When I initially sort of decided to speak, it was because I felt saddened by the polarization in our community and the way our administrators, school board members, and teachers in some cases have been addressed in previous meetings. I would say saddened is not a strong enough word at this point. I really feel sort of just almost horrified by some of the allegations that have been made against our board members, our superintendent, and our administrators. I have been a parent in the district for 16 years, 6 of which I served on the board, and it is not hyperbole to say that I have never had more confidence than I do this year in our board, in our teachers, and in our administration. I think the leaders in our schools are amazing. Our superintendent is amazing. Our school board has showed incredible dedication to a year that is unprecedented. And our teachers, as so many have commented on, are unrivaled. While motives and objectives have been questioned, I have no doubt that our school leaders are working tirelessly in the best interest of our students' educations and physical and mental health. As was clearly shared during the Getting to Green meetings, every district is different, working with various degrees of space, staff, and COVID cases. To say that because other districts are opening for 4 days of learning and that demonstrates a lack of commitment to the well-being of our students at MSAD 51, if we choose not to go back to 5 days of learning, doesn't resonate with me. We are working within CDC parameters that are not in the district's control. Throughout the pandemic, we have watched restaurants, businesses, and yes, schools make independent decisions about their capacities for opening. In the same way that we don't question restaurants that decide they are only suited to serve takeout rather than dine in, schools make decisions according to existing guidelines and individual circumstances. I don't claim to be an expert on spacing or have a full knowledge of staffing capacity, but I trust school leadership to make informed and thoughtful decisions. Some have complained that the Getting to Green task force was imbalanced with only 5 parent representatives relative to the large group of members employed by the district. I asked the question, who is in the best position to make decisions pertaining to our schools? In my mind, it is the professionals we have hired and the school board members we have elected. The voices of our teachers, administrators, nurses, social workers, and district physician are the ones I want to most hear from. They are immersed in the world of education and in many cases have been for decades. I am also
your time has come.
Okay, my last quote that I just want to say of a seasoned teacher, this has been such a hard year that for everyone, but the virus is to blame and not the schools. But thank you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you.
Julie Sachs.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Julie Sachs. I have 2 children in the district at Greeley Middle School. And I know that teachers are working tremendously hard this year, and I recognize that they're afraid. I'm a special education teacher for 5- and 6-year-olds in a neighboring district, so I live with that fear. Because of my role, I cannot physically distance from my students, and so I teach in masks and a face shield, and I try to move past that fear. And now that I'm close to fully vaccinated, I know that science says I'm safe. And I also know that school is essential for my students. And I'm thrilled that the district I teach in voted to return students 4 days a week in May. When I listened to the administrator's presentation, I was excited because there are viable options in our districts. And even though some buildings still have barriers, we can find creative solutions to those barriers if the district is willing to keep looking for them. In the meetings, the administrator said that parents would need to be prepared to compromise. And the facilitator even repeated that statement and said the group would need to look for places to compromise. But when it came time to vote, every parent representative voted to continue working towards solutions, and every district representative voted to stop the process. We aren't asking to return students to school tomorrow. We're asking to continue working towards solutions so our students can continue to return to school later this spring. I know this is hard work. It takes every adult in our buildings to look at every available option, put every idea on the table, consider every possible logistical solution. Every district has space and staffing issues, and every district has to work exceptionally hard to overcome these issues. But we're doing it because we know that school is essential. The hybrid model was a good solution at first, and for those of you finding success with this model, you are truly lucky. But for many of us, hybrid learning is doing more harm than good. Vaccines are available to every educator, and tomorrow, vaccines are available to every Mainer age 16 and older. We don't know what the state of the virus will look like in May, but if we stop this work, we know our students will not have any more school. I have no confidence that our students will return to school full-time this fall because I haven't seen evidence that our district is willing to make hard choices and to prioritize our students. I have loved being a part of this district for the past 7 years, but I've lost faith in our superintendent and I am losing faith in our school board. I urge the board to consider the long-term ramifications of preventing our students from coming back to school, and please vote to continue this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Lillian Philbrook. Lillian? Okay, Catlin Byers.
Hi. Microphone's on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lillian.
Hello. Hello, my name is Lillian Philbrook, and I am a 4th grader at Greeley Middle School. I am on this Zoom because I want to express my own opinion about hybrid learning. First, I want to give a shout out to my teachers, Mrs. Grund and Mrs. Duncan, who have battled the crazy maze we call hybrid learning. We've had about 6 days that were supposed to be in person and turned to red. My teachers had to make online lesson plans in less than a day. I just got a new pack of masks that had 50 in them. There are only 14 in-person days left in the school year. If I used one of those masks every day for the rest of the year, that means I would only be using less than 1/4 of those masks. Before quarantine, I would get overwhelmed by the terrible struggles of everyday life, like tying my shoes and stubbing my toe 5 times. I would scrunch up my face and stomp to the school doors. But when I would go to school and see everyone smiling, my frown would fade. So as you would imagine, during the lockdown, I had nothing to turn to when I was sad. I missed my family and doing theater and my friends. My parents were working and did not have enough time to help me. This is happening to other kids just like me in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and kindergarten. I'm very lucky to have a Nana who taught 3rd and 4th grade so I can do my remote work while my parents work. Another thing I'd like to point out is that going into kindergarten, I knew no one, but I made friends quickly. If I had to do remote learning in kindergarten or 1st or 2nd, I would not have made the friends I still have today from kindergarten that gave me confidence, whether it was directed kindly or not. A lot of people tonight have said that going to school full-time was impossible, but people said it was impossible for women to vote. People said it was impossible for people with disabilities to play sports. But today we look back on it now and say, why did we think that was impossible? I believe anything is possible. And isn't that what our parents and teachers have always taught us?
Thank you. Michael Lombard. Michael? All right, we'll come back around to you. Jen Janako. And I'm really sorry if I'm butchering your names.
No, you did great. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Janako. I have 2 students in the district, both at Greeley Middle School. I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to everyone who spent their time this evening and before this, working out possible solutions, thinking about different angles, and just trying to come to a consensus. This is, it's certainly complicated. I work at the University of New England, where we're just coming out of a shelter-in-place order. We had 2,000 undergraduate students in the past 8 days have to shelter in place or go home due to an outbreak. And so I think it's just important that as we come to this space of trying to figure out not only what's going to happen in the remainder of this school year, but next school year, that we really think about the impact of that switch over to red, especially. My students and our staff and all the folks that I work with at University of New England really felt the sting of no spring break. We wear masks everywhere, inside and outside of public spaces. We voluntarily get tested every 6 weeks. And regardless of all of that, just a couple of slip-ups caused our whole university to have to shut down. And so I just want to, again, focus on the idea that although we are all struggling with this, I think that it makes the most sense for us to stay in the hybrid model because it is really demoralizing to have to go back to red after we worked so hard for so long. I would love to see us go back to green as soon as possible, but it just doesn't seem like it's time yet. And based on what I've heard from the committee as well as the folks tonight, I think I'm still in that same space. I know that means a struggle for a lot of people, and I hope that we'll continue to support each other in our community in whatever ways we can, whether we agree or disagree with the outcome of the go back to green or not. So thank you for all the time and effort the school committee has put in, the council or the administration, the staff, the teachers. It's been hard, but I think we've all been able to get some benefits also from this very strange time we've lived through in the last few years, the last year rather, feels like a few years. Anyway, so thank you again.
Thank you. Mary Carbon.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My name is Mary Carbone. I live in Cumberland and I have 2 kids in the district, a 1st grader and a 4th grader. As a parent, I fully support staying in yellow this year while trying to increase the number of Cohort C students as identified by the schools. I support the hybrid model despite the fact that my children really struggle with remote work and really miss spending time with their friends and classmates. I support the hybrid model because we are living through a pandemic and we need to make decisions that will lower case numbers and maximize protection for everyone. I have no doubt our schools are doing their best to get back to full-time as quickly as possible. So I say let them work on that. Our schools are making tough decisions and they're doing a good job of it despite facing intense criticism no matter what they do. It would be nice if we as a community could support their efforts, or at the very least, refrain from inflammatory social media posts. It is also very discouraging to see the front yard of our elementary school continually turned into a propaganda zone. We can and should set a better example for our children. I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Porter and the board, the administrators and teachers, the nurses, ed techs, and all of the staff for their hard work this year. I am proud to be a part of a school system that has handled this past year with fortitude, grace, and compassion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sherry Wolverton.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I am from Cumberland, and I have a Greeley grad and a current sophomore in school. And the purpose for me speaking tonight is just to say thank you so much to the administration, teachers, school staff, to the school board, and most especially to all of our students. I just am absolutely amazed at your hard work, your perseverance, your dedication, and your strength to continue working on our students' behalf despite the personal attacks on your character and the decisions that you have made. It's been heartbreaking for me to watch all this and to read all of everything that's been going on. I support your efforts to keep our students and school staff safe and healthy, and I appreciate your expertise on so many different levels. Recently, Principal Carol MacArthur spoke about our community members questioning her integrity as an educator. I can't tell you what that did to me and what I'm sure it did to many other people who actually took the time to listen to everything that this school system has put out for us. It absolutely broke my heart. I want you to know that there are many people just like me who regard all of you with more pride, more gratitude, and more empathy than you could ever imagine. I am an educator. I'm currently teaching, and I'm currently in my 37th year of teaching. I know exactly what you guys have all gone through. I live it every single solitary day. What I agree with what everybody else has said as far as nobody at all wants this model, but it's what we have to do in order to move forward and be able to hopefully go into green in the fall. So I just wanted to say, please keep the hybrid model in place and listen to the recommendation of the committee. I just so appreciate everything that you all are doing, and please know that to keep the faith and keep your strength, because what you're doing is just outstanding, and you may not hear from all of us, but we're there with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Bredden.
Hi, everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I had some words written down to speak. I'm not sure I'm really going to follow them because it's kind of, I have to say it's a little bit disheartening to watch the screen as people are speaking. There's obviously a clear difference between when someone is speaking in favor of keeping the hybrid model. I see a lot of head nods and feedback, and then when parents speak up, going for, advocating for their kids to go back to school for more in-person time, there's a lot of blank looks, looking away. And I feel like, is any of this going to matter to you, what I'm about to say? I think it's important to note that we can match their in-person time that they've had in 7.5 months in 7 weeks. I think that's important. I would challenge your idea of what consistency means. I've heard it referred to as stay the course, keep going with what we're doing. For my kids, consistency is school 5 days a week, not bouncing to 3 different places where they have to go for their schooling every week. 2 days at Mabel I. Wilson, 1 day at Nana's house, 2 days at rec. That's not consistent for them. They need school. I also really, it's kind of turned into I don't know where teacher support and advocating for my kids have become an either or. It can be both. I wholeheartedly support my kids' teachers, all of the teachers. And if you ask my kids' teachers, they would tell you that. But I can also advocate for them to get more from their schooling at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I know that the standard operating procedures have changed as of April 1st, so that school classrooms that have assigned seating no longer need to quarantine the entire classroom. That was just released by the CDC, and I really hope that, I know it's under review by the health team, and I think that it would be pretty beneficial if we adopted that as well. I guess just before my time is up, I really hope that this can turn more into, I don't want it to be parents versus educators. I don't think that it needs to be that way. It can be more of not us versus them, but us and them. But we need some transparency from the administration for us to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman Mays and Cynthia Sweat.
Good evening. My name is Norman Mays and I'm a resident of Cumberland. My wife Cynthia Sweat and I have 2 students at Greeley High School who have grown up in the district. First, we would like to express our deepest gratitude to Mr. Porter, the administration, staff, and school board members for their tremendous dedication this year to our students and our community at large. You've done a phenomenal job. We appreciate that you have not been influenced by those who may be using these meetings as a platform for political agendas, which have all too often and regrettably sunk to personal attacks. We believe that as a community, we need to be supporting our district rather than trying to tear it down. We as parents are responsible for the well-being, not only for our families, but also that of our teachers, our administration, our school board, and the entirety of our community. We reiterate how much we appreciate all they have done for us during these incredibly unusual times. You are our heroes. Second, we believe the decision on how we move forward in educating our students should not be based on politics or even the inconveniences we as parents may be experiencing. We support continuing following the CDC guidelines. We support the Getting to Green Committee's recommendation to stay in the yellow for the safety of our students, teachers, staff, who all work in such limited physical spaces, and they truly are limited. We understand that this presents challenges. It has not been ideal for any of us. We have experienced these struggles on a personal level. However, we as a community can make this work. Lastly, our own high school students have had many conversations with us about this serious matter, and they have expressed their own desire to remain safely in school in the yellow for the remainder of the school year. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you. And Jody Orenick.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jody Orenick. I'm a Cumberland Center resident and mother to a first grader at Mabel Wilson. I'd like to be forthcoming in saying that I did not prepare a statement for tonight, and I thank you for allowing me to speak in such short notice. I would like to offer my perspective as I'm a single parent who is the primary caregiver and sole provider to 3 young children and has not at all been represented tonight. I'm new to this district, moving here less than 2 years ago to be able to offer my children the benefits of this school district. and to also join a community that offered both myself and my children a safe harbor from the very points that Jessica Chamberlain spoke to earlier. I'd like to first address the survey that we continue to go back to. It's so hard for me to even entertain a comment to that data when I stand firm in saying that survey was unethical. After Cumberland publicly stated that we were in a dire health emergency, one of the first communications to go out was a survey that was extremely swayed in both the questions and options that were provided. I'd like to ask the district and the board to hire a third party survey professionals that can reissue that survey, and we can look at the data from there. I do not even think we should be considering that data. I'd also like to address the challenges that the district and the community are facing in the upcoming weeks and months, specifically focusing on planning. I don't say this lightly when I say that I have exhausted all options to make hybrid model work for my family. It does not. When we first went yellow as a single mom, my option was my mother, who is a part of the very population that we work so hard to protect. And that guilt of having to use her, it's still with me today. But again, I did what I could do so that you could plan. And I have been shown no plans, not for this spring and most certainly not for the fall. I'm not experiencing inconvenience. We are experiencing injustice. My children are as well. My son is in an IEP. He goes to school Thursday, Friday. It's offered to him 10 minutes a day.
Jody, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it has been 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the end of the list. I'm going to go back through the people I called who weren't there, starting with Will Sachs.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening. My name is Will Sachs. I live in Cumberland and have 2 boys at GMS. I was the 6-8 parent representative on the ad hoc group. While I greatly appreciate the opportunity to get to know some of our wonderful teachers and leaders, I left the experience profoundly concerned with our district's inaccurate assessment of the crisis at hand and its reluctance to keep students at the center of decision-making. I was deeply troubled by the district's presentation on the mental health implications of the pandemic and remote learning, occurring on video number 2 at the 33-minute, 30-second mark. To my parent colleagues who are concerned about the impact of social isolation and remote learning, I urge you to watch and make your own assessment of whether this is a district that has any honest appreciation of the mental health crisis facing our children. To suggest that the amount of students who will benefit from a return is proximate to the amount of students who will experience discomfort is contradicted by all credible assessment on this issue, including statements from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the American Psychiatric Association. Second, I am concerned by the role and undue influence of the district's consulting physician. To suggest that a district in Maine would be, quote unquote, jumping off a cliff by returning more students under masking and social distancing requirements in an increasingly vaccinated state is alarmist and unproductive to any meaningful discussion. During 3 sessions, the consulting physician offered no serious assessment on the mental health crisis facing our children, yet spoke at length on the workload of our nurses. While I greatly appreciate the work of our school nurses, to suggest that nursing workload is a barrier to returning to school when so many children are in social and mental distress is indicative of a serious misunderstanding of who a school system is designed to serve, or a physician's proper role in advising a school district in crisis. I strongly urge the school board to consider an alternative or additional physicians in its consulting team, as what has been offered is not reflective of the nuanced, reasoned, neutral, and complex discussions that should be occurring with medical professionals advising schools. Lastly, I am profoundly troubled by the deference that this school board has afforded Superintendent Porter. Nonprofit and public institutions risk collapse when trustees remain silent, fail to ask difficult questions, and fail to demand change when the lights and microphones are turned on. Most importantly, I would like to remind this school board of their obligations under Section C of the board members' code of conduct, which requires that members base decisions first on how they will affect students. On March 2nd, the Biden administration announced priority vaccination for all K-12 staff. Rather than seize this chance to safely bring back willing students, this superintendent and school board have squandered this opportunity, electing to take a running out the clock approach to this academic year. It is clear to me that this is not the superintendent nor the school board for this moment. I strongly recommend, demand, urge, and beg for this school board to recognize this crisis for what it is and appoint a third-party expert facilitator and administrator to develop a plan to bring all willing students back to school in May. Neutral and experienced experts add clarity and accountability in moments of crisis without emotion. It will come with expense, but those costs
I'm
will
sorry
pale.
to interrupt you, but your time has come.
They will pale in comparison to the loss of public trust we see on display tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy,
yes.
this is Jennifer Stewart. I'm getting texts that there's some people that are in, have been let in that haven't been called to speak. So
yeah, let me go through my list and then I'll ask if there's anybody else.
okay. So after you're all done, if you could just reach out to me, Andy, and we can just resolve any issues at that point. Okay.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Aaron Sassville. Ron Greco. Gretchen McCloy. Erica Cole. Brandy Wells. Magdalena Farley. Patrick Cole. Megan Quirk. Tony Donnelly. Rob Barrell. Kate Levesque.
The Will Sachs guy was pretty good.
Yes.
Hi,
this is Kate.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, sorry. So I have, my name's Kate, and I've got 2 kids in the Mabel I. Wilson School. And I really appreciate having the chance to talk at this board meeting and all the work that's really gone into all of this. And so just from my own experience, we went into this, at the beginning of March, thinking it would be, maybe quick. And it was a full remote, and then into this hybrid model. And, I know that there's, differing opinions all across the board. And so I just, really hope that we can, come to a conclusion. I am in favor of getting the kids back in green safely in the schools. My kids are in kindergarten and first grade. And I think just from a parent perspective, it's super emotional. I, with my husband, work full time, 60 to 70 hours a week. I am not giving the attention my kids need. The teachers are doing the best that they can on those 2 days that my kids see them. They in Cohort B. And so there's been a lot of, off days or, COVID events, but, we talk about parent and our emotional distress and physical and social, and, that does get displayed onto the kids. I oversee health and welfare, and, mental illness is up 23%, and that's with adults. So I can't even imagine with kids who are not in school. And I want, I definitely think safety is of concern. And so I've come to terms with, for this year, we may need to be hybrid to keep routine, to keep structure. But I think there's a real fear for me, and I think some of the parents that have expressed on here for the fall. And so I guess as a community, instead of, and I know that there's differing opinions, but it is coming together and working out a solution. And my real concern, and maybe it's because it's personal, is the elementary kids. I think the kids that, completed the survey, and I know that there's some, variances on the survey, but for the high school students or middle school students, if I look back, the hybrid model, they can read, they can write, they can structure themselves, they have routine, they can set up, a structured setting where you don't need a parent. My kindergarten and first grader, that's not feasible. That's not reasonable for me to continue my work teach them and have them, get the education that they need. And I have a real fear that my first grader is going to be going into second grade not knowing how to read and write and do the simple fundamentals. So I guess my ask is
3 minutes.
sorry.
You want to finish your sentence?
Let me go back to the green. Sorry.
Thank you. Michelle Philbrook.
Hi. Yes, I'm here this time. I know it's getting to be a little bit of a late night, so I won't take too much of your time. But I just wanted to echo, it's actually some of Kate's comments that she just made, and Jessica Chamberlain's comments about how this has affected not just the students, but the families as a whole, especially a lot of working families. I know it's definitely affected us, but I feel like we're lucky in in my family. I have a fourth grader who you heard from earlier, Lily. She's a lot better spoken than I am. Let's see, a couple of things. I sent an email to Superintendent and Porter and the board last month, and I just wanted to underscore some of the things that I said with that in that email. One being that I was disappointed with the makeup of the Getting to Green committee, which seemed to have a pretty predictable outcome attached to it when we saw, how the makeup of the committee was going to go. And the other just being that I think probably all of the parents that have spoken tonight have said, we really do appreciate